प्रेम किशोर प्रभु स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं। 72 है अभी, जब तक इंट्रोडक्शन होगा आ जाएंगे लोग।
Yes, we can start. Yeah. So I think Tushar Prabhu, yes, you can unmute.
A very good afternoon to one and all. I heartily welcome all of you to this enlightening session of 3S conference. I hope all of you had a wonderful gala time in the morning session of the conference. So trust my words, this session is going to be more enlightening than the previous one. Before going into the details, the theme of this conference is about the amalgamation of simplicity, spirituality, and sustainability. So all of you must be thinking this is the need of the hour, that's why we are doing. But no, this has been injected in our scriptures, in our Vedas, and also being extolled by the Lord himself in the chapter 3, sloka 14, which says, Annad bhavanti bhutani parajanyad anna sambhavaha yagyad bhavati parajanyo yagyaha karma samudbhava, which means all living beings subsist on food, and food is produced by rains. Rains come from the performance of sacrifice, and sacrifice is produced by the performance of prescribed duties. So this creates a cycle. On the same line, our ISKCON founder Acharya, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada has also emphasized on this relation, which quotes as, there is a sweet transcendental interrelation between all living entities, irrespective of not only caste, creed, and color, between man and man, but between man and beast, man and birds, man and reptiles, man and plants, etc. And so also between man and God, between God and others, and so on. This farm shall be the center for such supreme culture of knowledge. It shall set the example that neither God nor the living being nor the nature is in any way antagonistic towards one another, but that all of them exist in harmony as a complete whole unit. Srila Prabhupada also had once quoted, if one person has a piece of land and the cow, the holy cow, holy mother cow, then he or she can be sustainable, self-sustainable. So without wasting too much of time, in this session, let me emphasize, we will be enlightened by persons of eminence who are stalwarts in the areas pertaining to the themes of the conference. And to chair this session, we have amongst us Dr. Niyati Joshi, who is working as director with Ministry of Finance. Being a recipient of many accolades and fellowships, Dr. Joshi specializes in demography and sustainable development. He will be enlightening all of you with his words of wisdom in future sessions tomorrow. Without delaying much, let me welcome Dr. Niyati Joshi to chair this evening session. Over to you, Dr. Joshi.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar Das.
Welcome, sir.
I welcome one and all. Good evening and Hare Krishna. First of all, I congratulate Institute for Science and Spirituality to have organized this program today on the day of International Day for Biological Diversity, which is falling on May 22. As we all know that Vaishnavism is one of the major forms of Hindu and Sanatan Dharma, where we worship Lord Krishna, his expansion and avatars. Religious ecology provides a basis for exploring diverse cultural responses to the varied earth processes. Since this conference is about environment, simplicity, and spirituality, we have to interlink, and the presenters in this session has interlinked very nicely. It is further said that Samundravashne Devi Parbatastan Mandale Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Pad Aspas Chamashwame. We have also been praying to Mother Earth as mother. Like we have said in Shastras, it is said, Mata Bhumi Putro Ham Prithibhya. There are many such verses in Prithvi Sukta, Vatharva Veda, which has glorified the Mother Earth and its environment. We see that not only the Shastras but modern scientific world practices to save the environment, culture, and humanity. There have been attempts to protect the environment. Recently, the Commission for Sustainable Development has brought 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be achieved by 2030. When we further go deep into the Shastras, one of very famous text 2 of Govardhanashtakam is Swapreshta Hastamoja Sokumarya Shukhanubhote Rati Bhumate Vivrittahi Mahendra Brajya Hatimapi Ajanma Govardhano Medishtam Abhishtam. Here, Mother Earth is holding on its lap Govardhana, whose glory is unlimited and that provides everything in its lap for the humanity, for living the complete life. It is said when Mother Earth is holding the whole environment in itself, even the Vajra of Indra could not affect her in this destroying in any way when the lotus hand of Lord Krishna was there to protect her. Similarly, if we live our life in tandem with the nature and environment, we can very easily live our life and in tandem with the nature. So we have to protect environment and with a very simple way of living, which Bhagavad Gita in 13th chapter sloka it says, Amanittam adamittam ahimsa chantir arjavam acharyo pasam saucham asthair gamat vinagraha. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, and simplicity. This has been highlighted by this verse, which is to be taken in tandem with the nature. Further, in Isopanishad text 2, it has been said, Isavasyam idam sarvam yat kincham jagatyam jagatyen takten bhunjita magrit kasyasvid dhanam. Here, everything that is animate or animate means that is nature, persons, humanity, that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. So we have to follow a certain rules of the nature, or rules of the God. Therefore, this whole environment is a part of God and we cannot disrupt the process of environment against the rules established by God, for example, biodiversity, etc. Where Lord Krishna has also declared in 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Gain yattan pravachyami yagya jnanatam abritam asnute anadimat pram brahma na satsam na sad uchyate. Everything that begins and that ends, for everything that is I am the cause and effect. So similarly, he is the cause and effect for the environment, humanity, human being, Atma, soul, everything. So we can say that we have to live our life around these 4 words, which is very important. Now, all of these and similar wonderful differences exist to understand the link of humanity with the environment and Vaishnava culture, which is the main topic in this session. Now, I welcome honorable speakers of this session. First, I welcome Professor Ravi Gupta. Let me introduce one of the prominent speaker. He holds the Red Charles Chair of Religious Studies and serves as Director of the Religious Studies program at Utah State University. He has various accolades and various feathers to his head. He is permanent research fellow of the Export Center for Hindu Studies and a past president of the Society for Hindu Christian Studies. His current research focuses on Bhagavad Purana Sanskrit commentaries. He enjoys teaching world religions, Hinduism, Sanskrit and religious studies and theory and method. Now I pass on the session for presentation to Professor Gupta. Before that, I would like to say that you have 20 minutes, sir. Now over to Professor Gupta.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi, for the kind introduction. I want to especially thank Dr. Ramesh Goyal for inviting me to this conference and to his entire team for organizing it. I won't spend too long in introduction since we have a short amount of time. The title of my presentation is Building Blocks of a Vaishnav Eco-Theology. And basically, I want to talk about 4 things here with you. First of all, just briefly discuss the importance of ecco-theology, religious perspectives on environmental sustainability, especially in the Indian context. Secondly, I want to point to some building blocks of a specifically Vaishnav ecco-theology. And third, I want to point to potential problem areas in terms of ecco-theology and Vaishnavism. And finally, leave some time for questions. So I'm going to do all of that in the space of, well, I think including the questions, we have 30 minutes. So let's see how quickly we can get through the time we have here. So the first thing to mention is that our religious or spiritual perspective, our theological perspective on the environment directly affects how we treat the environment and how we coexist with it. There's a lot of research behind this that has provided evidence that, especially in the Indian context, religion and spirituality are key partners in the effort for sustainability. It's not something, religion is not on the sidelines as a cheerleader or merely as a supporting element, but really a direct actor, an agent in the process of building and changing attitudes towards the environment and ecological care. And theology in particular, that is how we see the natural environment, how we see the world in relation to God and in relation to the place of human beings in this. Those theological perspectives, have direct impact, particularly. Some research that I think is very useful in this regard, since there's very little I can say at this point, I would rather point you to other resources. Dr. David Haberman at the University of Indiana, Bloomington, has written several books on this, but one in particular that's quite useful is called River of Love in an Age of Pollution, the Yamuna River of Northern India, where he's provided a study of Yamuna ecology, both in terms of the severe pollution that we find in the Yamuna River, and and also at the same time, the way in which Yamuna worship and reverence for the Yamuna directly impacts ecological care as well as ecological destruction. One of the things he points out there, which I think gives a really fine example of how theology directly impacts this, directly impacts our environmentalism, is he talks about how when he was doing a research on attitudes towards the Yamuna, he found basically 3 different kinds of attitudes that were prevalent amongst Yamuna worshippers. The first attitude, so when confronted with the pollution that the Yamuna was facing, people gave 3 different kinds of responses that showed a different kind of theology in relation to the Yamuna River. The first response he would get when he would bring up Yamuna's pollution was the attitude that was the response was the Yamuna cannot be polluted. No matter whatever dirt we put into the Yamuna River becomes purified, it becomes cleansed by the power of the river goddess herself. And just as she purifies negative karma, and just as she purifies the heart of those who enter her waters, so she also purifies any physical forms of pollution that we might place within her. The second attitude that he documented was people acknowledging the fact that it was possible for the river to be polluted, but the pollution did not affect the Yamuna herself. It did not affect the river goddess herself. Rather, the pollution was something that affected us. When we put it there, we were affected by it. And a good example of this would be along the lines of light pollution, that when we're in a large city, it's impossible to see the stars because of all the artificial lights that are present at night. Those lights don't affect the stars themselves. They stay far beyond any of that. They glow brightly on their own strength. The only person it affects is us, because we can't see the stars at night. So using that metaphor, some people he spoke to argued that the Yamuna herself was not affected by the pollution. It was us who were going to be affected and diseased, etc., by using her waters or bathing within them. And then the third perspective that he encountered was people saying that, yes, indeed, the Yamuna herself was suffering from pollution, and arguing that the Yamuna is our mother. She has been a river, a goddess, our Mata for centuries. She is our mother. She has been generously providing for us in terms of her, water that sustains life, that gives us spiritual sustenance as well, and sustaining civilization upon her banks, irrigating farmland, etc. As a mother, she has been giving and providing for centuries. And now our mother is sick. She's ailing, she's diseased. And moreover, she's sick, she's ailing because of our actions, because of our mistreatment of her. So is it not our duty, therefore, to take care of her? So the idea that Yamuna is actually sick, that she's dying as a result of our action, and that she is a goddess and yet she's been affected by us, this was the third perspective he encountered. Now, as you might probably guess here, these various audiences had different levels of concern and care for the cleanup of the Yamuna. And the first category that I mentioned was the least likely to take any action in regard to Yamuna pollution, the category that denied that any pollution was even possible because she was a goddess. At the second category, second sort of response was more likely to react, the view that said she is unaffected, but it does affect us. And the most environmentally active was the third perspective, which considered that the river herself, the goddess herself, was affected negatively by our actions. So the only reason I mention this is simply to say that there is a direct correlation between our religious and spiritual perspectives and our responses to the environment and to ecological care. So these two things are not separable, and this is why it's very important to examine religious, spiritual, theological perspectives in relation to the natural world, as we are doing in this entire panel today. Now, what are some of those theological perspectives in the Vaishnava traditions that help support environmental care? And I mentioned the Vaishnava perspectives particularly because that's my area of research and that's also the focus of this conference. I want to just point to a few building blocks, and each one of these building blocks I mentioned can be the subject of an entire lecture, an exploration of its own, and certainly academic essays and so forth. But again, my purpose in this presentation is simply to point in various directions for your own exploration. I hope you'll be able to take some of these items and it'll pique your interest, and you're able to move in the directions and explore in the directions that interest you. So there's three building blocks that I want to mention here. There's certainly others, but I think three will be sufficient for today. First of all is the Vaishnava idea that God is the world. This is something that's actually pan-Indian in terms of pan-Hindu, in terms of the ways that various Hindu traditions think of God in relation to the world. From a Vaishnava perspective, this is most clearly embodied in chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna shows his Vishvarupa, his cosmic or universal form. And but that vision is repeated over and over again across Vaishnava texts, particularly in the Bhagavata Purana, where we have multiple occasions where the natural world is mapped onto the body of God. And so, along the lines of trees being his hair, the mountains being his bones, the rivers being his veins, etc. And so there's a vision of the natural world that's mapped physically onto the body of God. creating a direct connection between the divine and the human or the cosmos. Further aspects of this element, excuse me, of the relationship between the world and God has to do with Vedantic theology as well, where in most forms of Vaishnav Vedanta, God is not only the nimitta karana, that is, God is not only the agent who creates the world, but he is also its upadana karana, namely the substance of that world itself, right? So to put it in the famous metaphor of the clay and the potter, the Lord is not only the potter who makes the clay pot, but he is also the clay, which is the substance of the pot itself. And again, it is significant that God is given not only agency, but also substance in relation to the world, and it directly provides for a spiritualization of perspectives on the world itself. And finally, particularly in Chaitanya Vaishnava or Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, we have the idea of Shakti, of the world being the energy of God, and therefore eternal, even though it's changing, it's in flux, it's eternal nevertheless, and directly connected to God's being, inherently connected to him. And therefore one can meaningfully say that God is the world. Even though he is more than the world, he is also the world. Now, excuse me, give me just 1 minute here. Now, here's I think the important move in relation to Vaishnava theology. That so how I just got a note that I'm exceeding the time limit. How much time do I have remaining? Can someone clarify?
You have 15 more minutes.
You have time, Prabhu. 15
Yeah,
more
you have
minutes.
time. You have 15 more minutes.
Okay, someone just sent me a notice saying I'm exceeding the time limit already. So yeah, so it's a 30-minute total period, yes?
Yeah,
including questions? So
Prabhu,
15
yes,
minutes.
Prabhu. Yeah, you have 15 more minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So in this, so here's the crucial move, I think, in relation to God being the world. Is because Vaishnavas regard God as a person, this necessarily means that therefore the world is also personal in nature, okay? And I've written about this separately in the Journal of Dharma Studies about the impact that this has in terms of Vaishnava theology. So feel free to look up that article published, I think, in the most recent issue of the journal, International Journal of Dharma Studies. But when we think of God as a person, then the world also, and God is the world, therefore the world also becomes personal. And so throughout Vaishnava theology, we find that various aspects of the natural world are personal in their conception. And so rivers are goddesses, various physical features of the world, like stones, for example, which are generally relegated to the realm of dead items, but stones themselves become personal deities. We think here of Shalagram, in particular, Giriraj Shilas, as well as Shivlingas and so on. And then items like trees as well become personal. Once again, Haberman has done excellent work in this regard by demonstrating, he's written a book on Govardhan Shila in particular, and the impact that that has on environmental thought, as well as a book called People Trees, examining trees as persons across Hinduism and across the Indian subcontinent. So this idea of humanizing the world is often a cause for embarrassment in Hindu thought, because it smacks of anthropomorphism for many people, that Hindus worship things as gods. And this embarrassment is really a legacy of colonial studies on Hinduism, where anthropomorphism throughout the history of scientific and humanistic studies, anthropomorphism, seeing the physical objects as having human features, the way that we put eyes on trees or eyes on Govardhan Shilas. Anthropomorphism has been seen as something that is embarrassing, that is primitive, that is heathen in nature. And Haberman makes an excellent argument that it is not anthropomorphism which is a problem or that should be a cause for embarrassment, because anthropomorphism has been an ancient human habit across cultures of making the natural environment relatable to human beings. When we put faces on things, we can relate to it. When we see things as persons, it allows us to develop personal relationships and reduces the possibility of exploitation. So think of how in India, when a tree receives a face on it, or it's worshipped as a divinity, as you can find in any village, any town pretty much, it becomes impossible to cut down that tree. And so you find trees growing out of the middle of homes or buildings or businesses because no one wants to cut down a tree that is seen in personal terms. The same is true with animals. The same is true with other physical elements. When we make them personal, when we see them in human ways, then it becomes more challenging. It can still be done, but it becomes more challenging to then harm it in various ways. The problem is not anthropomorphism, but anthropocentrism. That is the idea that human beings are at the center of creation and all things are meant for human exploitation or engagement or pleasure or use. This creates a consumerist attitude towards the environment, which is problematic. So again, two key terms, anthropomorphism versus anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism being problematic in this context. Anthropomorphism, although historically embarrassing for a lot of people, is something that ought to be embraced and something that ought to be, in fact, developed and promoted and used. And then the last thing I want to mention, which I'm going to say very briefly, is to say that our vision of ultimate reality is set in natural surroundings. So from a Vaishnava perspective, ultimate reality, that is the vision of what is paradise. This is for Vaishnavas, the idea of Vaikuntha or of Vrindavana or Golok Vrindavana. In all of these perspectives, the descriptions that we find in the Bhagavata of that ultimate reality are always set in a naturally idyllic environment. And in contrast, pretty much every account that we hear of demonic activity, the demons of the Bhagavata Purana and other Puranas, whether they be Hiranyakashipu or Ravana or so on, always correlate with severe destruction of environmental surroundings. And so one of my favorite passages is with Hiranyakashipu, who is specifically described in the Bhagavata as being destructive of the earth's trees in many ways, and all aspects of the natural environment. Okay, last thing, two problematic, before we open to questions, two problematic areas in the literature that have been pointed out by scholars as being potential problems for Vaishnava theology in relation to its environment, since I think for any academic presentation, we wouldn't just want to give the positive elements here. The first that has been pointed out in the literature, particularly by Dr. Lance Nelson in his article in the book Hinduism and Ecology, he points out that the Vaishnava and broadly Hindu idea that the world is a miserable place is Dukhalayam Ashashvatam, for example, in the Gita. This is problematic in terms of why should we care for the world when it's going to be a miserable, terrible place anyway, it discourages attempts to make it better. And this is definitely an issue that needs to be a concern for Vaishnava theology, Vaishnava practitioners in terms of attitudes towards the world as being inherently negative. However, I think that one way in which this can be used beneficially is that it often helps to temper expectations for how much we can improve things in the world. One of the things that's commonly known in environmentalist circles is a sense of hopelessness. How much, no matter what we try to do, the world's ecological condition seems to constantly deteriorate. And some recognition that that is inevitable, that we can help slow the process, we can perhaps even reverse it, but it's not going to be entirely perfect because that's the nature of the world, can actually help in that regard. The second problematic area that has been pointed out is the philosophy of vairagya, or detachment from the world. If the world is something that ought to be detached from, as Vaishnava theology points out, for everyone, I mean, particularly for sannyasis and renunciants, but also for the average practitioner developing a gradual attitude of detachment from the world, then why ought we be engaged in preserving or flourishing the world if we need to escape it anyway? And this is, again, something that I encourage all of us to take seriously as a problematic attitude that, in my experience, has often discouraged people from taking the environment seriously. Once again here, I think there's a useful element of vairagya that can be used not negatively, but positively in ecological care. And that has to do with the vairagya's natural ability to work against consumerism, to encourage an attitude of simplicity and minimalism in relation to our ecological footprint, by saying it's not how much we can consume, but how little we can consume, not how much we can eat, but how long we can fast, not how much we can sleep, but how little we can sleep. That is really a marker of our success in this world. So vairagya has its benefits, but when used in a sense of, well, the world doesn't really matter because we have to escape it anyway, can be quite problematic in relation to the environment. So those are two problematic areas that I wanted to mention, and we are working just perfectly in time. There were 4 things I wanted to cover, each for 5 minutes long, and we now have 5 minutes left for questions or comments that anyone wants to make.
Yes. So iPhone, no name is there. If he wants to raise, he has raised his hand. So want to ask any question?
So the chat window has been opened. So now the people can write in the chat box, and then either MC or the chairperson can read through the questions.
And my apologies if that was really fast. It was kind of a whirlwind in terms of what I wanted to point out.
It was really enlightening.
Thank you, thank you. And
So
nothing else, please do look up the references that I mentioned. I think that'll be more useful than any content I could
Professor
possibly.
Gupta, we have a question: how to deal with consumer attitude of people towards the environmental resources? From Preksha S. Joshi.
Yeah, so how to change attitudes. This is something that is obviously a great challenge. Here's the thing. Our technological and industrial relationship to the environment changes much faster than cultural and religious attitudes do. So think of, maybe half a century ago when people would eat their food on banana leaves or leaf plates, and after they're done, throw that leaf plate out the window, and that would decompose in very quickly, or eaten by an animal or something of that sort, and it would be gone. Now, in the past couple decades, those those leaf plates have turned into paper plates, which have then turned into plastic plates, and that change of disposable materials has moved so quickly in India and in the world, but attitudes of habit, culture, and practice do not move. Dr. Joshi, would you be able to mute yourself, please? Thank you. But attitudes of behavior don't change just as quickly. And so people still have the habit of throwing the plate out the window after they're done with their meal, but that plate is now made of plastic, which will not decompose in centuries. And so changing cultural attitudes is a slow process, but it's worth the work, because when those attitudes of consumerism gradually change, then they change for a long period of time. So change is slow in culture, but the effects are long lasting.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. So we have our next question: how to convince the modern youth about the importance of eco-theology in environmental sustainability?
Okay. How to convince the youth, you said?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, I think convincing the youth is less challenging than convincing those who are not young and in positions of power and influence and direction, because I think there's a growing consciousness amongst young people the world over in terms of importance of ecological care, because we see the consequences of that ecological destruction around us. So really, I think the challenge is, how do we convince those who are already set in their ways from practices in the past that have come from their youth and really have not changed because of the fact that I said cultural change and cultural attitudes is so slow over time. So I'm answering briefly here because I know.
Okay, so we can take one more question. That is very important. How can we make shift of life from city to eco-friendly lifestyle? I think question may not be complete, but you try.
So I really think that the best person to answer that question is our next speaker, Gauranga Prabhu, who has just arrived, because he speaks about this from direct experience and years of practice in putting it into force in an ecologically friendly community, namely Govardhan Eco Village, a place that I visited multiple times and found to be a wonderful exemplar for how Vaishnav theology can be used in the service of positive ecological practices. So let me allow this question to serve as a segue to the next talk, because I know our time is up, and just to offer my endorsement and appreciation rather for the work that Govardhan Eco Village has been doing, and that Gauranga Prabhu will now speak about as the next speaker. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope some elements of the talk were useful to you in terms of the various pointers, and I hope you'll have a chance to look up the various references that I pointed out.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. It has been a very interesting and enlightening talk, and you have tackled in a very brief time eco-theology, Yamuna culture, cosmic universe, morphism, and philosophy of Vairagya, everything in a very short span of time. Thank you. We will love to hear you in future also. Thank you so much. So now I invite second speaker of this session, Sriman Gauranga Das. Prabhuji, are you here?
Yeah, I'm there, and I request host to give screen share to Office of Gauranga Das, Office Gauranga Das screen name, so that the presentation will happen.
Okay, so Jyotishwar Prabhu, please permit. So I will just briefly introduce about Sriman Gauranga Das, who has been doing excellent work in the last 3 decades about transforming countless lives through activities and different roles that can be adapted by society. He is a mindful leadership consultant and running the initiatives to meditation. He has established the Govardhan School of Public Leadership in Govardhan Eco Village, involved in training future bureaucrats and public leaders in responsible mindful leadership with character and integrity based on the principles of Bhagavad Gita and other such shastras. Govardhan Eco Village is accredited to the United Nations Environment Assembly and United Nations Economic and Social Council. He holds a BTech degree from IIT Bombay. He is also a great cook and has cooked over 3 million plates in the period of 2007 to 2019. During the recent COVID pandemic, he, along with his team at Govardhan Eco Village, cooked over 1 lakh meal to feed the migrant laborers and tribal villagers. Over to you, Sriman Gauranga Das.
Yes, thank you. So thank you very much, Dr. Goyal, Dr. Das, Dr. Ravi Gupta, for your kind words of introduction on the Govardhan Eco Village. So today my presentation is on Govardhan Eco Village and the 17 SDGs. You know, these are a collection of 17 interlinked goals that were designed to be blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. In the Ishopanishad is already declared, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. So the entire concept of our Upanishads is holistic. Nature is seen as cyclical, and the SDGs were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly and intended to be achieved by year 2030. And it was part of a UN resolution called the 2030 Agenda, and it is colloquially known as Agenda 2030. So these SDGs were developed in the post 2015 development agenda as the future global development framework to succeed the Millennium Development Goals, which ended in 2015. So the idea is that yes, the whole world is dealing with the crisis of climate change, but spiritual organizations come into the picture because their main agenda is transformation of the heart, transformation of consciousness, transformation of desires, which results in transformation of attitudes, which results in transformation in how we perceive and look at things. And that transformation in perception transforms the entire process of decision making, of prioritization, and ultimately it affects and impacts lifestyles and choices, which ultimately translates into an entire wide range of activities which society indulges in. As has been pointed by Dr. Gupta, India traditionally was living as part of the Vedic tradition, a very sustainable life. So many of the things which nowadays become a huge talking point in terms of green living, they were part of regular commonplace life as part of the Vedic paradigm. And therefore, the whole idea of science and data-based organizations as United Nations, reaching out and wanting to shake hands with spiritual organizations which are faith-based, which are based on tradition, which are based on scriptures. It's a very landmark moment in the history of mankind because practically everybody, irrespective of their particular denomination, has rallied around the center point of a planet which is burning. And therefore, in spite of all kinds of individual points of view and perspectives and differences which different denominations of people across the world may have, they're all people who may not have talked to each other for some time, living within a house with 4 to 5 rooms. But when the house is on fire, you have to break your silence and come forward and support and help each other, because ultimately the house is on fire and our and future generations' life is at stake. With that understanding, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, as part of ISKCON, had established a simple paradigm known as simple living and high thinking, and expected ISKCON temples to be not just places of worship, but also through Krishna, who represents cow protection, and Balram, who represents agriculture, to have a few communities across the world which would exemplify this principle of simple living, high thinking, so that when people read and study the books and they want to know, is there a lifestyle which can be different from the city lifestyle, which can be more sustainable, then we would be able to share with them such examples. So His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj spent a significant amount of time in one such community at New Vrindavan in West Virginia. And then he also established a community in Chowpatty, a city-based community. And so as part of the mandate which he had received, which ISKCON had received from Srila Prabhupada, he decided to establish the Govardhan Eco-Village way back in 2003. And as part of my presentation, I'm going to share with you how has this journey progressed. We have established the Govardhan Eco-Village based on 3 pillars. And the 3 pillars of Govardhan Eco-Village is spirituality, sustainability, and social impact. Go to the next slide. So this is the mission of Govardhan Eco-Village, that we have an alternative sustainable model where simple living and high thinking is emphasized. We have harmony with the self, harmony with the divine, harmony with nature, and we have several optimized action models, and we have tried to connect tradition with technology and showcase that yes, there are traditions which are extremely beneficial and healthy and very powerful. There are technologies, but we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater and try to harness the positive things which technology can actually help us adjust with our current lifestyle in a more sustainable manner. Next. So therefore, the first SDG, which we have tried to support and facilitate as part of our initiatives at the Govardhan Eco-Village is no poverty. And as all of us know, that despite the ongoing progress, the global poverty, almost 10% of the world's population, they live in poverty and they struggle to meet the basic needs such as health, education, and access to water and sanitation. In 2015, more than half of the world's 736 million people were living in extreme poverty. They lived in sub-Saharan Africa. And without a significant shift in the social policy, extreme poverty will dramatically increase by 2030. And currently, the rural poverty rate stands at almost 17%, and in urban areas, it is almost 5%, and half of them are children. And a study which was published in September 2020 found that poverty has increased over a period of several years, and it has significantly increased by 7% during the last 1 year thanks to the COVID. Although it had been increasing over the last 20 years. So at the Govardhan Eco-Village, we decided that we need to support the local community. Many of you may be aware that Palghar district is one of the most impoverished districts in Maharashtra. And so we decided to adopt the farmers, and in around 75 villages across the Eco-Village, which is almost 2 hours from the Mumbai International Airport, 108 kilometers. Our website is www.ecovillage.org.in, and when you go on the contact page, you can find the directions to come here. So we wanted a tourism to be connected to environmental protection, to be connected to the farmers training and rural development activities around. India's almost 69% of the population is in rural spaces, and we wanted to reverse the migration. So we have so far conducted almost 3,000 farmers training, and Wadi program is basically what is known as multi-cropping, where over 1 acre of land we teach the farmers how to have agriculture, floriculture, horticulture, and also take care of livestock and take care of their cows. As you know that cow protection and Goraksha is very much a part of our ethos. And then we train them how to create cow dung and cow urine based fertilizers, so that one of the biggest challenges in India is how to overcome this NPK based farming. So an alternative has to be created. So we have successfully trained more than 20,000 farmers so far. 3,000 farmers are currently being trained, and there has been significant improvement in their salary, in their annual income. For example, families which were earning only 8,000 to 10,000 rupees per annum, have now started earning anywhere between 1.5 lakhs or 2 lakhs per annum Indian rupees, which is around 200,000 Indian rupees. So therefore, this element of affecting and impacting the farmers and helping them in their pursuit of one of the largest occupations in India, which is farming, has been taken up in a big way by Govardhan Rural Development. Next. The second SDG is eradicating hunger. And as you know that to end hunger, to achieve food security, and to actually improve people's nutrition is one of the main agendas of SDG 2. So almost 700 million people are still hungry, almost 9% of the world's population. And up to 10 million people in 1 year, or nearly 60 million people in 5 years. So the majority of the world's undernourished, almost 381 million people, are still found in Asia. In Africa, almost 250 million people, they are in this kind of undernourished condition. In 2019, we found that almost 1 in 10 people were experiencing this food insecurity. And in 2019, an estimated 2 billion people did not have regular access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food. And if these trends continue, the number of people who will be impacted by hunger in 2030 will grow up to, it will grow beyond 840 million, or almost 10% of the world's population. So one of the most impacted in this hunger category are children under the age of 5. So almost 144 million children in 2019 were impacted by this, especially in Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so almost 47 million children under the age of 5 in 2019 have been affected by acute undernutrition, and it is extremely impacted only by limited nutrient intake and infections. So we decided to create Govardhan Annakshetra meal distribution program. As many of you may be aware, the distribution of food is something which is regularly done by all the Hindu temples, and Annakshetra is something as a concept described in the Mahabharata also, where Yudhishthir Maharaj was running a very powerful Annakshetra where millions of people were being fed. And the idea is that yagya, dana, and tapa should be done by human society. And as part of dana, one of the greatest forms of dana or charity is considered to be distribution of anna or food. Our founder Srila Prabhupada also mentioned that within a range of 100 kilometers, no one should go hungry. So therefore, we have taken up the entire Palghar district and we have launched what is known as Hunger Free Palghar campaign, and we plan to distribute almost 1.5 million meals in the coming year as part of our agenda. Over 77 kitchens were running during the COVID in 2020, April and May 2 months, and ISKCON distributed almost 50 million plates of prasadam to the migrant workers who were stuck during COVID. So therefore, as part of this, in a small way, Govardhan Annakshetra of Govardhan Eco-Village is trying to deal with hunger. And very soon we are also going to establish a hunger research institute to be able to connect agriculture and nutrition and hunger eradication, because all of them are very deeply interlinked. Next. The third is good health and well-being to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. So as many of you are aware that between the year 2000 and 2016, globally, the under 5 mortality rate decreased by 47%. Still, the number of children who are dying under the age of 5 is still very high. In 2016, it was almost 5.5 million people. And in 2015, it was found that, almost many of these people were impacted by this because of not proper care as far as sanitation and health conditions are concerned. So therefore, Govardhan Eco Village collaborates with Bhaktivedanta Hospital, which is in Mira Road. It is a 200-bed hospital, now going to become 350-bed very soon. And they have established their centers all around the Govardhan Eco Village. And they have conducted almost 2,500 health camps and more than 100,000 treatments and even 1,800 plus cancer surgeries. On a regular basis, they have their medical vans which go out and conduct various kinds of homeopathic camps, eye surgery camps, blood donation camps, and various such camps by which the local people are benefited. And these are some of the images of some of the activities which they have been doing. And one of the very important elements of this is education with respect to health, because many healthcare diseases, health-related diseases can be prevented if proper education is given at the right time. Next, the fourth is what is known as quality education. To ensure equitable quality education, almost 86% of the population in 2016 was defined as literate. That's true, but still, almost 381 million children were out of school in 1998 in that period. And until 2014, this number fell down to 263 million. But still, the fact remains that education, especially at secondary and tertiary levels, is becoming very important around the world. And by 2100, this figure is predicted to become almost 7 billion. So top three skills of 2020 are: first, that complex problem solving; second, critical thinking; and third is creativity. So in India itself, I'm part of a consortium called IIT-IIT, which is IITians for Influencing India's Transformation. And we discussed in that almost 270 million people, students in India are in the K to 12, 30 million are in the colleges. But still, we find that in India, almost every single year, the number of unemployed is growing, because many of those who are going through this education are not being employable. And therefore, as part of Govardhan Eco Villages education program, we have started various levels of education, including rural education, where we are training students with a special kind of science lab so that they can connect nicely. 9,000 students have benefited, 1,000 sessions have been conducted. We also have a school of public leadership. We also have an excellent Bhaktivedanta Research Center where we are giving MA and PhD related to philosophy and theology. And we also have a Govardhan Gurukul where in-house we are training children right there. This is the need of the hour. Education is the future. Goal 5 next is gender equality. And, we know that women are almost 47% more likely to suffer injuries in car crashes because safety features are designed for men, and almost 33,000 girls become child brides every single day. And women in rural parts of Africa spend almost 40 billion hours every year collecting water. And only 6 countries give women equal legal work rights as men. So, we have decided to take upon the Govardhan Women Empowerment Program, and through agriculture, through skills and livelihood training, more than 300 plus self-help groups have been created, 3,000 women have been empowered, 12,000 family members have been impacted. And the idea is they come around and we teach them skills by which they can make various kinds of products, like bags, like saris, like, pickles and papads, and various other kinds of things by which they can even set up their own small shops. And this adds to the income of the farmer community, and they very much appreciate this. Goal number 6 next is clean water and sanitation. And as all of us are aware, that in 2017, almost 71% of the population of the world could manage safe drinking water, and at least 90% had a basic sanitation available for them, but still 785 million people are still lacking basic water facility, and at least 2 billion people across the world are using water which is still contaminated by feces, and this can severely impact diseases like diarrhea, cholera, dysentery, etc. And almost 500,000 deaths happen every year thanks to waterborne diseases. And by 2025, half of the world's population is going to live in water stressed areas. So therefore, we try to support the local villages with 850 plus lift irrigation, 5,500 drinking water, and customized irrigation beneficiaries. So what we do is we do a hydrogeological survey and help the farmers locate where the water source is, help them actually, we support them by creating the water source and then have a system by which it is equitably distributed amongst them. Goal number 7, we have affordable and clean energy, and as all of us know that households consume almost 29% of global energy, and they contribute to 21% of the carbon dioxide emissions. So we at Govardhan Eco Village have established a 220 kilowatt solar power. This is a picture of a wonderful solar park which we have created. We still have at least 30% more of solar to be covered so that we can become 100% of the grid. And another interesting thing is the biogas plant, where we have a 3,600 kg cow dung gives almost 30 cubic meter of biogas at the Govardhan Eco Village, and animal driven prime mover, which you see below, where the bulls rotate and they can actually create a pump out of underground water. So, across the world, we have, 16% of the global primary energy coming from low carbon sources, but that's still extremely low. So we are trying to do our bit to add to that. Goal number 8 next is to promote decent work and economic growth. And, actually the global growth rate of the GDP per capita was 2%. And for the least developed countries, it was almost 4.5% in 2018. And actually, in Govardhan Eco Village, we have tried to support the farmers by creating livelihood initiatives, by setting up shops for them so that they can actually do various kinds of businesses, even if they do not have land or they have been cheated of their land or whatever. More than 250 tribals have been benefited, and they have experienced an almost 50% increase in their individual income. We have just had a Srinathji Foundation or Dharam Singh Desai Foundation invest almost $2 million in creating Bhaktivedanta Kaushal Vikas Kendra, a skill development college, where every year 200 students will be benefited. Already 70 students have been benefited every year. But this is going to be the state-of-art skill development college where 70 plus skills and trades are being taught to the students, to the tribals every single year. And this will be opened very soon and will be part of what is known as GEV 2.0. GEV 1.0 is what we have currently. GEV 2.0 is spread over 40 acres. This is known as Govardhan Eco Village. That will be known as Govardhan Entrepreneurship Village, where we are going to be setting up various avenues for entrepreneurship to flourish, because the future of India is not in employment, but in entrepreneurship. So understanding that, we are trying to be ahead of the curve and creating facilities by which the pass outs can actually become entrepreneurs and create employment for others. So, currently the working poverty affects more than 630 million workers, or 1 in 5 the global working population, or 56 million. So therefore, we want to make a difference in our own small way. Goal number 9 is industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And in 2019, almost 14% of the world's workers were employed in manufacturing activities, and things have not changed much since 2000. And therefore, we thought that, yes, if the carbon dioxide emissions are continuing and they have declined, by nearly 1/4 since 2000, but this shows, okay, yes, there is a decoupling of carbon dioxide from GDP growth. So nearly the entire world population lives in an area covered by mobile network, right? And therefore, we have to create a model by which people can live eco-friendly, at the same time have modern amenities. So we tied up with Griha, which is Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment. We also tied up with IGBC, Indian Green Building Council, and we have created 500,000 mud blocks, which uses only 0.275 megajoules per kilogram of energy, as against 72 megajoules per kilogram of energy used by regular brick wall with paint. And then we have created almost 250,000 square feet of construction. We have a 125 key resort facility. And what you see on the right side is almost 15 million liters of rainwater harvested, and almost 40 million liters recycled with soil biotechnology plant, which is a completely green technology for recycling all of our black and gray water. It's an IIT Mumbai patented technology, which is a combination of bioreactors, root bacteria, and various kinds of geophagous earthworms, which make this happen. And Dr. Goel has personally experienced this and seen this. So we have become a platinum rated green eco village. And we have won more than 35 awards so far for many of these interventions. Go ahead. The goal number 10 is reduced inequality, and bottom 40% of the population, in the 2012-2017 period has seen some growth in 73 countries, but still the bottom 40% of the population received less than 25% of the overall income or consumption. So therefore, at the Govardhan Eco Village, we were awarded in 2017 with the award representing India, ecotourism as a catalyst for rural development, where we are trying to connect the needs of the city folks who are looking for peace. So we offer them facilities for enhancing their peace through yoga, through Ayurveda, through spirituality, through finding a purpose in life. And then, we catalyze rural development and try to reduce these income disparities. And we are not just an island, but we are actually connecting all of this as an oasis. Goal number 11 is sustainable cities and communities. Very, very important, because the number of slum dwellers reached more than 1 billion or 2018. So, we want to showcase how we can actually live in inclusive manners, and how we can actually bring back culture into habitations, whether it is city or village. So we have created a replica of Vrindavan, which was one of the most sustainable places of Krishna's pastimes. So the replica of Vrindavan becomes a place where we are showcasing how people can actually reconnect back to nature and reconnect back to their purpose. And so it is very, very difficult to change holy places today, but we are showcasing a model where in every district, over 20 to 50 acres of land, the government can start planning to recreate holy places, which not only becomes a place of pilgrimage, but also showcases how environmentalism should be approached. Goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. Almost the subsidies for global fossil fuels in 2018 was around $400 billion. Whereas, an estimated 1/3 of all the food produced, equivalent to 1.3 billion tons worth almost $1 trillion ended up rotting. And we want to change this. And therefore, we feel that one of the best ways it can happen is when the global population learns better ways of self-restraint. There is no shortcuts. Self-discipline, self-restraint is very important. Discipline is the fusion of intention with action. So no better way to train this than through yoga and through Ayurveda. And along with that, we are also linking, as part of circular economy, the produce of the farmers back to the cities and across the world through Haribol. Very soon you're going to be able to access Haribol grains and Haribol milk in different parts of the world also. And therefore, this is a very important element: Ayurveda, yoga, and organic food. Next. Goal number 13 is to take climate action, to take urgent action to combat climate change. And we have been very active in various climate change initiatives and activating various conferences by which we are able to share and express and exchange ideas on how this can be done in the best possible way. Next. Number 14 is life below water. And in this, we have a whole plastic recycling plant, because as you know, plastic is one of the largest menace as far as marine ecosystem is concerned. And 97% of the planet's water is in the oceans. And we know that one of the greatest challenges is the plastic littering which is happening. So we are showcasing a model of how through this pyrolysis plant, 150 kg of plastic is treated every day, resulting in almost 30 liters of refuse-derived fuel. Next. Goal number 15 is life on land, is how we can protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of ecosystem managed forests. So we have 52 indigenous species of rice and millets being conserved, and almost 20,000 trees and 165 species. We collaborated with Bombay Natural History Society, and they are the ones who were founded by Dr. Salim Ali. And we did an entire biodiversity intervention in 2017. And as a result, specific species of plant were chosen. And as a result, we have seen an almost 50% increase in the butterflies and the insects, and the birds population in the eco-village.
Sorry, Prabhuji, just to remind you, 5 minutes more are there.
Yes. So goal number 16 is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And we really feel that man, animals, and society can live in harmony with each other. We are showcasing this by demonstrating our Goshala, by demonstrating how we can live in harmony with each other. Our entire community is centered around the principles of the Bhagavad Gita, simple living and high thinking, keeping Krishna in the center. And goal number 17 is partnerships. And we are happy to share that if we had just remained as a city temple, then we would have attracted a few Hindus who are interested in worship. But when we branched out and actually involved ourselves in applied theology by trying to translate the message and the lessons of the Bhagavad Gita in the form of an eco-village, we can see what kind of partnerships we have attracted, and people who are wanting to collaborate with us, work with us, and see these examples and also translate it and implement in their own spaces in different parts of the world. So we are happy to share with you that we are part of United Nations Environment Program. We are affiliated to United Nations Committee for Combating Desertification, and we are also an accredited NGO with United Nations Economic and Social Council. And we are very grateful to this wonderful community of scientists and environmentalists and theologians who have gathered. And thanks to Dr. Goel for making this happen. Thanks to Anuttama Prabhu, who is leading this, and to Gopal Patel also for showing this leadership in making this happen and bringing spirituality, sustainability together along with social impact. And we can definitely do our bit in creating transformation and bringing the world closer to the SDG agenda. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So now the session is open for questions. We can take 2 questions.
I see Mr. Vikram Singh's hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr. Tomar, please post your question in the chat section.
chats.
Yeah, Tusharji, please go ahead.
Yeah. We have a question from Ms. Joshi. The question says, what kind of arrangements are made for education of rural girls in Govardhan Eco Village?
So we have an entire wing of the Govardhan Eco Village dedicated to training the rural girls around. And first of all, we have a midday meal program which facilitates the enhancement of the attendance in the schools, the local village schools. And also, we have lady volunteers who specifically go and train the girls in various kinds of basic health and hygiene, and also encourage them and inspire them to study and not drop out of schools, and specifically by giving them attention in training in mathematics, science, education. And we found that there has been a dramatic increase in attendance of the schools by these children. Along with that, we also try to inspire the farmer families that they should change their perspective on how they look at the girls and change their attitudes and behavior. So this combination of both ends has helped transform this to a great extent.
We have another very relevant question. This is from Dr. Banerjee. Is there any difference in the growth rate of the SDGs with and without spirituality? If yes, why?
Thank you for asking that question. To be honest with you, my subject of specialization is not sustainability, but as a result of the project which has been given to us, so I had to get involved and connected with various sustainability experts and try to execute on the ground. You know how difficult it is to get anything done in rural India. So as part of that exercise, I got to know more and more about sustainability and the principles. So whatever little bit I know about sustainability is thanks to the association of many sustainability acharyas or gurus. So I would say that what we have is a living lab where we invite people, and we have nice air-conditioned rooms also, which run on solar. So you can come and stay here, some of you, and then do a proper research. And we are open for facilitating research projects where you could do these kind of exercises and then publish papers. And then I think we are very open to collaborate and facilitate such research, which is based on the question you have just asked. So welcome to any researchers who are interested to do this as part of your exercise. But at this stage, I don't have any research or data to be able to share with you with conviction.
Prabhuji, we have one more interesting question, which is very important for micro levels. It is from Malini Devi Dasi. Prabhuji, if we were to replicate a part of this eco-village in a street, for example, with 2-3 cows and all areas, as you mentioned, Prabhuji, in a town or city, what could be the possible challenge one can face?
I think the 3 challenges which I have faced in the eco-village while creating the eco-villages, first is inspiration. The leader may be inspired, followers are not inspired. Leaders and followers both get inspired, donor is not inspired. By the time donor gets inspired, the follower has lost his inspiration. So there are various cycles of this which I have seen. So one is inspiration, steady, sustained inspiration. That means your intention has to be very, very clear as to why you want to do this. Second is integrity. That yes, we have to be true to our principles and values, no matter how difficult the challenges may be. So we have tried to stick to our, values of spirituality, sustainability, and social inclusion.
So now, Prabhuji, we can take the last question.
No, I have not yet.
He's not completed. Yeah.
Okay.
The third one is pending. Yes.
Okay.
Because why I'm saying is sometimes there are many Western guests who come, and then they are from animal rights and vegan movement. And then they start saying, hey, we don't agree with your Goshala and what is this? We have to go vegan. Many more Western people would come and everything. But well, whatever it may be, we are not vegan, we are Krishnan. That means we believe in what Krishna was believing. That means protecting the cows and having the milk in ahimsa manner. So many times proposals will come which may inspire you to go on a mission drift. So integrity is very important. So inspiration, integrity, and third is intelligence. That means don't think that as per your particular topography, local terrain, local climatic conditions, local government support or lack of support, the solution will come on a platter like this, just take it and then you take it like that. No, you have to use your intelligence to think out of the box and then come with this. So today on our call, we have Dr. Aditi Michel, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer, and she's working out an entire, module by which you can come for a month or come for 2 months and go through an entire training program on how to create an eco-village. So we are very soon beginning our eco-village consulting, module, and you will be able to actually come and experience the eco-village, and then we will handhold you to try to create an eco-village of your own. So this is basically what we are planning in the near future.
Thank you, Prabhuji. We are taking now last question from Dr. Banerjee. That is very interesting also. How innovations of eco-village are sustainable and industry relevant?
Industry relevant.
Yeah.
Industry relevant.
Yes. So basically, I would say the other way around. We have utilized, sustainability relevant technologies from the industry and tried to use it in a manner which has harmonized with village and nature environment. So therefore, we have not created any new technology. The soil biotechnology was created by Professor Shankar and Dr. Patnaik many years ago. We just implemented it, and we have just integrated all of these innovations with spirituality and social impact. So therefore, we don't claim to have created any new technology, but we have tried to put all the technologies at the right place. Because as you know, unless you have a systems thinking, you cannot actually accomplish the real impact which is intended through various separate achievements and efforts. So that's where I would like to end, because I have another Zoom call at 6:30 and I've taken a lot of your time. Thank you very much, Dr. Goyal, for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Tushar and Dr. Joshi, for your wonderful.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So now we will be having our next session, and our next speaker is Professor Ramesh Goyal. He will speak on the topic environmental process engineering and environmental microbiology department of University of Utah. His topic of his speech is simplicity to modernity, ecosystems, human health and human well-being. I just want to give a brief introduction of Professor Ramesh Goyal, who is a researcher at the interface of environmental process engineering and environmental biology. He has published more than 60 papers in journals of the status of nature, communication, environmental science and technology, water research, and scientific reports. He is the recipient of prestigious Presidential Award for Research in 2011 and recipient of numerous awards at the department, university, and national levels. I also want to inform that this conference was envisioned and being organized by his efforts also. So over to you, Professor Goyal. You have 25 minutes to speak.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joshi. This conference is an effort by all of us collectively. So the title of my talk is Simplicity to Modernity. So the key issues facing the globe all we need is energy on material ground, water and food, what we call FEWS, F-E-W, FEWS, food, energy, water, integration. And what are the challenges facing these three important needs? We have water scarcity, water contamination, droughts, overuse, water rights, international disputes. And I will make the case that water scarcity is not actually naturally generated, but it is generated by us, man-made. Food, soil health, as Goranga Prabhu mentioned, food security is must. And even if there's a lot of urbanization, still we have lots of land to produce food. But still, why do we face food security, food scarcity? And these are some of the reasons where soil health is degraded, soil erosion, saltwater intrusions, excess salinity, that means using water reuse if it is not treated, and if we use it, different salts, different chemicals, they accumulate in soil, and then they degrade soil health, resulting in low food production, and energy lack of renewable sources, diminishing non-renewable sources, and then emissions also. So let us look at the water scenario. So on Mother Earth, we'll see a lot of water. It's almost 75 to 80% of Earth's surface is covered with water. So why do we have to worry about water? It's a lot of water, but unfortunately, 97% of the water is brackish or saline water. That means we cannot use that water directly. It's in the form of oceans. Then of that, 3% fresh water, just 30% is groundwater, almost nearly, let us say 1%, right? So total out of 100%, total 1% is groundwater, and other 2% is ice cap and glacier, which is fresh water, but that is not available to us directly. Of that surface water, groundwater, like 0.3% is surface water. So if you look at, so all those big rivers, we see Great Lakes, and then big lakes and rivers and Nile River, everything, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, they all together constitute only 0.3%. And other water is not available to us. So basically for direct use, all we have is 0.3% in surface water, then other is groundwater. And unfortunately, of that 0.3% surface water, more than half of that 0.3% is contaminated currently. It's contaminated because of rapid industrialization. It's contamination because of our own ignorance over time. So water consumption, water contamination, and affluent lifestyle. Why it has happened, why we contaminate. So on left-hand side of a screen, you see water withdrawal and agricultural withdrawal along with population. Population has increased, especially beyond 1950, 1960s. And then there's agriculture water withdrawal also increased, which makes sense. And then water withdrawals per capita. This is per capita. This is not agriculture water on your right-hand side of the screen, top right-hand side. And you see most affluents in countries, or what we call most developed countries like United States, Canada, and Europe, they tend to consume way more water than many other countries. So there is a geographical imbalance. Then if you look at other regions of contamination, whether it's water or air contamination, because look at this number, population, India, China has almost 4 times as much the population as the United States, but look at the number of vehicles per 1,000 people, way more than these two countries. So what is happening is not only air contamination, but then for each vehicle we fabricate, we make, they have greater water, what we call indirect water footprint. So there's a lot of consumption of water in this advanced country. And on your right-hand side bottom, you see cubic meters of water per person. And then you see this is per year. And you see almost population is 3 to 4 times as much as the United States, but US consumes almost double than China, and then 3 times as much as many developing countries. And this is the scenario with many developing countries. So affluent lifestyle That means moving from simplicity to modernity. Affluent lifestyle means modern. We want to become modern, and then we end up consuming resources, and we end up consuming way more water. So because of this, you see a lot of red area in this map, and then other yellow and light yellow. So what it has done is it has caused geographical imbalance of resources, misuse of resources, and less appreciation of Mother Earth. What damage have we done so far? So not only different advanced country or developed countries, they consume more resources, but then contamination, the origin of contamination started, misuse started from many of these countries, and it is prevalent in developing and underdeveloped countries also. And this is a very specific example. And with time, these, it's not like these contaminants were not there 50 years back. They were there, but with modern technologies and instrumentation, now we are able to detect these contaminations in water. For example, who thought about the presence of pharmaceuticals in our drinking water or water, right? Nobody. But then with advanced instrumentation, people detected this concentration of either ibuprofen or triclosan depressant or antibiotics in our waterways. And then came estrogens, and then came many other what we call contaminants of emerging concern. And then now it is PFAS, perfluorinated compounds. And what is PFAS? The non-stick utensils we use in our household, those are coated with PFAS. That's why they are fire resistant. And then people use this PFAS compound, perfluorinated compounds, in as fire extinguisher also to combat the fire. Now we are dealing with new contaminants like microplastics or nanoplastics, and this data is alarming. Almost 94% of tap water, in the United States they found plastic, and likewise many other countries also. So, and then contamination and our carelessness also. So human health related consequences and waterborne diseases are very common in developing and underdeveloped countries. And we see viruses and we see bacteria because of inadequate treatment, or because of cross contamination, because of poor planning. We have drinking water pipes running very close to sewer pipe, and then there's cross contamination. So even if there's good treatment, but then water gets contaminated. And then you see unsafe water kills more people than disasters and conflict. You see, this is alarming data. Unsafe water, almost 780,000 people per year. And then the greatest threat to the globe is this prevalence and emergence of antibiotic resistance bacteria in the environment. For example, a few years back, this superbug was detected in Delhi water, and the bug is now known as New Delhi beta-lactamase NDM1 containing gene. So these are alarming. So superbug means many antibiotics, they cannot kill this bacteria. So we have to synthesize new antibiotics, and synthesis of new antibiotics means new threat to the environment and more consumption of resources. Generally, the paradigm or the existing thought among even the academicians like myself is that increase in human population is causing a lot of water scarcity and resource scarcity. Yes, increase in human population always needs more resources, more water. But I tend to disagree that the immediate scarcity and food scarcity is caused by this rapid population growth. Yes, they do put some stress, but look at the agriculture production. With population increase exponentially almost beyond 1950, 1960, so is agriculture production. It's the agriculture production also increased. So why do we have food scarcity? But what we don't think is water pollution. How about water pollution? Exponential increase. you see all these different regions in the world. Less contamination is in the United States because of awareness from 1950s, 1960s, when late 1960s, when Clean Water Act was established, and many efforts were put in place. But look at rest of the rest of the world. There's a lot of areas where water is contaminated. As I stated initially, of that 0.3% surface water, more than half of that is contaminated. But now you just imagine if all of that water, that more than half is contaminated, if all of that water was available for us to be used, we wouldn't be having water drought or water scarcities. So, and who are responsible for the water contamination? Is our human society is responsible for water contamination. So likewise for food scarcity also, we have abundant land, and because people are farmers, and even as Dr. Rajinder Singh mentioned yesterday, and I will show one slide later on, where people are moving from rural areas to urban areas, more and more people, and there are less and less people, they want to do farming, there are less and less people doing agriculture production, one reason. And second reason is because of rapid our greediness, same land is used repeatedly for multiple crops, and what is happening is overuse of soil, leading to soil degradation, and then overuse of fertilizers affecting ecosystem. So both together, water scarcity and food scarcity, if we look at a micro level very closely, what is happening is because we are causing water contamination, because we are leading affluent lifestyle also, which means instead of one bucket of water, we end up using 10 buckets of water because of the affluent lifestyles in some nations. We are the ones responsible for water scarcity and food scarcities. Moving from simplicity to modernity, and this is what we have done over time. Again, I'm not saying that we should go and live in a hut. It is not possible for us, but at least we can appreciate the simple lifestyle and the natural resources around us. But what we have done is we have moved from simple lifestyle to modern lifestyle, which is directly related to exploitation of natural resources, contamination of air and water, and then whatnot, and then interference with biodiversity and ecosystem. So as I stated earlier, more and more people choosing affluent lifestyle. And what is that? That means more and more people. The dogma is that in rural areas people can't have affluent lifestyle, because the definition of affluent lifestyle is not to live healthy and have good food and good air. The definition of affluent lifestyle is totally different. So this is what is happening. And then beyond 2010, there's just both lines, they just crossed each other. You see this green line, people in rural areas, less and less people will be living in rural areas, more and more people living in cities, resulting in misuse of resources, and then causing many environmental degradation problems. So modernism versus indirect water footprint. So what is happening? Modernism, on your left-hand side screen, you see different categories of water, different categories where water is used, for bathing purposes, dishwasher, leaks, and all that stuff, toilets, big portion. So if we conserve ourselves, if we put at individual, what we can do at individual level, if we do little bit of efforts at individual level, we can still save 30 to 35% of fresh water on daily basis. Some facts. So these are our direct freshwater uses. In the kitchen, taking bath, flushing the toilets. These are direct freshwater uses. But there are indirect freshwater uses we don't realize. For example, it takes 25 full bathtubs of water to grow one cotton t-shirt. It takes 20 to 66 gallons of water to make one pint of beer. A man who drinks a few beers once in a while and likes dairy product consumes 100 times his own weight in water every day. Vegetarian people, they just consume half of that. So significant gain in water when we are vegetarians, not only from ecosystem and our health point of view. That is entirely a different topic. We can spend days discussing that. But in terms of water conservation, also water sustainability, vegetarianism promotes water conservation and resource protection. And then some more facts. It takes 200 gallons to produce 1 pound of sugar, 330 gallons to produce 1 pound of rice, and 1300 gallons to produce 1 pound of meat. So vegetarian and non-vegetarians, and how can we protect our water resources. So in summary, affluent lifestyle and unconventional food habits have led to different scarcities. Why this happened, as I stated earlier, not only we have moved from simple lifestyle to affluent lifestyle, but we have also moved from natural resources to these synthetic resources. And when I say natural resources, it doesn't mean that we exploit natural resources. Living in harmony with natural resources is what we have been doing according to Vedic culture. But unfortunately, because of rapid industrialization, and why industrialization happened, because we were aspiring to be industrialized, we were aspiring to have modern products, and that's why we moved from simplicity to complexity, and then exploitation of natural resources, loss of sacred values, emotion, ethical meaning, and these are some of the consequences of our affluent lifestyles, which has caused a degradation of the environment and ecosystem around us. Lifestyle affects environment. Lifestyle simply refers to defining characteristics. In fact, the concept of lifestyle actually applies only to variants of consumerism. So when we say lifestyle, it comes, consumerism, as Dr. Ravi Gupta mentioned this morning, this early evening in his talk, consumerism, a largely unrealistic way of life that assumes. So when we talk about affluent lifestyle and then consumerism, it has three main features. Number one, what we tend to think is that what one wants is entirely a matter of choice. So that means it is so selfish. It's so selfish. I don't care about the environment. I want what I want. This is what is going to fulfill my desire. So that is just one-centered approach, which is promoted by affluent lifestyle. Number two is that almost all choices are within one's grasp. So I can avail anything I want. As long as I have money, I can do whatever I want to do. So that attitude has also degraded. I think that is one of the main problems in affluent lifestyle. It's degraded the environment and misuse of different resources. And the third one is that consumer choices can and should be hierarchically ranked from the most to the least desirable. So again, this is choice based. People can take choice. Let me choose whatever I want to do, not according to what the environment needs or what the ecosystem needs, but what I need. So this is all together about me, myself, and I. Western concept of citizens of affluent nations. So the Western culture is based on affluent lifestyle and availing different resources according to their own choices, the three points I stated. And then underlying high-end consumerism. So Western culture is based on consumerism. And then this is not just limited to Western concept anymore. It's prevalent in other nations also. And is Western consumerism, the belief is that the most desirable lifestyle is dependent on having the most prestigious occupations, which are in turn associated with highest income. So you see, we call some countries as capitalist country, and the reason is just with money we can buy anything, and for money we need to earn, and to earn we have to have a good job, high paid job. So that is the attitude in developing developed countries, and the same attitude is now being transferred to countries like India. And supports the concept of resource exploitation according to one's choice. As I stated in my second point, just people just think this is my choice, this is my life, I am free to lead my life. But people, they in general with affluent lifestyle, or those who are not God conscious, they tend to forget that it is not our life. Actually, we are part and partial of the supreme personality of Godhead, and this is his creation, and we don't have any right to exploit his creation. He has provided us free will because we need to survive in this world, but that doesn't mean that we have a choice to exploit this environment. Increased consumerism, as I stated, affluent lifestyle means increased consumerism. I buy this, I need this. If you go to a shopping mall, you will see 15 different varieties of toothpaste. And if you look at the content, all those 15 toothpaste, they have nearly same constituents, 99.9%. So why do we have different? So there's competition. They want to provide choice and options to consumers. And what does that mean is that choice and options, they come at the expense of degradation and exploitation of the environment. So a growing number of studies also show that there is no correlation. Indeed, there may be a negative correlation between growing incomes and subjective measures of happiness. So why people want to live affluent lifestyle? The thing is they want to be happy. Well, if I lead affluent lifestyle, if I have more money, then I will be happy. But that is not the case. There are many studies out there which shows that no, money or incomes, they can't buy happiness. So you see all these problems in developed countries. I mean, when I was a child back, I never heard of things like depression and anxiety, but now they are prevalent in our society, not only in developed countries, but even in developing or underdeveloped countries also. So the
Sorry to
consumerism,
interrupt you, Professor Goel. 5 minutes more, please.
the promotion of consumerism, however, is portrayed in the media, leads to increasing pollution, resources, and then negative contributes to loss of health and among the poor in every country, because this creates an imbalance in resources. Also, some countries, some regions, they're using a lot more resources than other, so there is imbalance of resources. So a negative, as I stated, what happens, and this data is from the United States, and you see this increasing trend about annual death from alcohol and drugs and suicide rates. And these are depression in the age, like you see 16 to 20, it's rising over time. And then you see divorce rate and then total suicide. So if in a developed society, people are happy with affluent lifestyle, why do we see this increasing trend? This is something for us to think about. So negative health effects, I wanted to give a couple of examples, but I will skip these slides. But these are classical examples from 1980s when in US, there's a town called Woburn, 8 miles north of Boston. Few industries, they contaminated groundwater. And because of groundwater contamination, people were unknowingly drinking that water. And many people in that small town were, unfortunately, some were died, and then some people were suffering from leukemia. And then this movie, A Civil Action, is all about that fight between residents and those companies. And eventually, the residents, they won. And likewise, Erin Brockovich is another movie where hexavalent chromium was contaminated in groundwater, and then this lawyer fought on behalf of local residents and people, and then eventually was proven. The question is, why do we have to go through such an extensive exercise to prove that these big industries, they are the problem? And of course, surface water contamination, antibiotic resistance being, these are direct negative impact of our aspiration to be affluent, our aspirations to be advanced in lifestyle, and our aspirations to earn more. So complex lifestyles, what are our options? Resource protection, minimization. Try to find inner happiness, in not the superficial outer happiness in sense objects, but try to find out inner happiness. If we are satisfied from inside, we don't look happiness around us in material things. And then, of course, that will lead to simple lifestyle. So those are interconnected. When we lead a simple lifestyle, we tend to appreciate the nature, the ecosystem, the Mother Earth around us. And then, of course, be spiritual. So impact, for example, COVID, unfortunate incident, and still we are going through that. And I pray that we all come out of this nicely. But one lesson we can learn out of COVID is, carbon emissions, the low carbon emissions, because of, during the COVID era, there's less waste production, wildland habitats are happy, and there's less energy production. So recent data released by NASA in the US indicates that pollution in some of the epidemics of COVID, such as Wuhan, Italy, Spain, has reduced up to 30%. And in these cities or these countries, to reduce some level of contamination by 30%, it takes years actually, and a lot of millions and billions of dollars. But just because of why is it happen? This happened because people are inside, they're not eating outside, less transportation, all that stuff. And these are scientific evidence. These are not speculation. These are scientific evidence. And then during the last few months, consequences of COVID pandemic has successfully recovered the environment to a large extent. And these are also findings. And then air pollution problems have decreased. Social science shows a greater bonding among family members. So these are some of the data. So what we see is we can do it. So what do we learn from COVID-19 era? We are pampered. Pampered means the resources, and we tend to use it. We tend to choose affluent lifestyle. If we want, we could do it. So if we want, if we have desire, we can protect the environment at individual level also. We have to make in mind, okay, I'm at individual level, I am to do something. And we are the solution. The solution is not in technology. Technologies, they are secondary solution, the consequence. And then thing is, why do we need COVID-19 type of episodes to positively affect the environment and our well-being? We can do it, and that's a determination we should have. Simple living, just simple slide. In scriptures, it is stated that once devotional service means, spirituality or simple life is affected when we are eating more than necessary, over endeavoring, that means we accumulate wealth, accumulate resources unnecessarily, talking more than necessary, and being greedy for mundane achievements. This is straight from scriptures, and these scriptures are coming from directly from personality of Godhead, and they were written almost 5,000 years back in words, right? And they came long back from the beginning of the universe. So these are there, and we should follow these scriptures. And we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the purpose of my living? Why I'm here? I'm here, and I want to be happy. But again, the happiness is not in material things, but the happiness is in the science of self-realization. And once we are simple, there are different degrees of self-realization, but at least you can start at the individual level that, okay, I am going to contribute something to the environment. And then conditional happiness, we have to give up this greediness and then desire of this material happiness. Some of the examples, people still practice, as Gauranga Prabhu stated in his excellent presentation. We see all this going on in Govardhan Eco Village. There are other places I will show. And then people in some villages, they still practice, but these are slowly depleting. For example, in my home village, where I was born, there were 6 ponds or talab or jodas where they were divided. In one talab, on animals will go and drink water, some talabs for water capturing, and then, but now they're all depleted, no more. In last 25 years, this is what happened, and this is happening with many villages. Can we do resource protection? Can we go back to our basics and then protect the environment? As Radhika Manpro, Dr. Ravi Gupta stated, our appreciating the nature is embedded in our scriptures, like doing puja for the Shivji, which is, in material word, we can call it a stone, but we pray as Lord Shiva, and then Govardhan, and then different trees. We appreciate, we respect them as living beings. Actually, they are living beings, they have soul. This is how we pray them, this is how we worship them. So these are embedded, and if we go back to our basics, our root, then we will start appreciating Mother Nature more and more. Another example is Krishna Valley. Much like Govardhan Eco Village, Krishna Valley, you see cow, and they're exactly doing at larger scale, their sustainable community. One stark example is they don't use electricity in their house after 7 p.m. House, they don't have, they use those lanterns, and then early going to bed, early rising, and you see the bull cart using, and this is happening in Hungary actually. No, I'm not talking about India. It's Hungary. It's one of the developed countries. So these are possible solutions. I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your attention, and then I can take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Goyal, for giving an excellent talk on the current scenario. You have actually covered food energy nexus, water scenario, water consumption, contamination, damages that we have done to the environment, why human and its consequences on human related issues, simplicity to modernity and its impact, negative social and health impact and consequences of COVID-19. So thank you, and we are now open to the questions. Please write your questions in the chat box. Though we have left only for 2 minutes for the questions.
Well, it seems the message is very crystal clear by Dr. Ramesh Goyal.
Yes.
That's why no questions we are expecting.
I mean, yes.
So I think we can move on, Chairman.
So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we are now moving on. Thank you again, Dr. Goyal, for our excellent talk. And we will now go to the next section, that is on Vaishnav culture and the environment. It is by Sriman Dayanand, who is a learned scholar at the Institute of Vaishnav Studies, Gainesville. I would briefly like to introduce about him. Sriman Dayanand is a Vaishnav scholar affiliated with the Institute of Vaishnav Studies, Gainesville, Florida. He is a leading an effort to convert young people to adopt Vaishnav values and practices that are harmonious with nature. His approach is under the umbrella of cultural ecology and deep ecology. He has written many books, monographs, and articles on the Vaishnav culture, bearing impact on nature and what modern global society can extract from the culture to survive. He himself is a practitioner of Vaishnav culture for more than 5 decades. Over to Sriman Dayanand.
Hello. I'll try to keep my presentation a little, maybe 15 minutes, something like that.
Okay.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyvari Pashyatya Desha Tarane. You can hear me all right?
Yes, sir. You are clearly audible.
Good. Can I show some slides?
Yeah.
I'd like to have control of the screen here.
Share screen, yes.
Yeah, you can see those slides? Or this, it says Vaishnava culture and the environment?
Not yet, Prabhu.
Oh, I have to do it myself. I see. Okay. You're not
share screen option.
Yes.
right. Okay. You're not controlling then. All right then. It should be this one here. All right. So this is all right here?
Yes.
We can see your screen, Prabhu, but you have to project your
Okay.
PowerPoint. Open the file, please.
Oh, it should say, it should be on PowerPoint. It should say Vaishnav culture and, no?
Yeah, I can see your folder. So you go to your folder, which I see now. You click on Vaishnav culture and environment PowerPoint. So it should open. The file is not open yet.
I did. It is open. I'm not, for some reason it's not showing. All right.
Maybe if you allow, then we can control remotely from your computer.
Wait a minute here. Let me do it again. All right, now you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
I
We
have
can
to
see
get
now.
rid of this. I have to get rid of this. All right. Okay, good. Now I think I've got it. Okay. I wasted a couple of minutes there. I just wanted to start a react to a couple of things. I'm a bit of an iconoclast. This is Vaishnava activism in the United States, so a little different from probably some of the other presentations. I just wanted to comment on a couple of words. I hear this word advanced country or developed country and developing country. I really don't like these words. I consider the countries that have the least impact on the environment are advanced or developed. So moving on, Vaishnava culture and the environment. Why isn't this advancing here? All right, terminology. Instead of Western culture, I use the word modern global culture. Vaishnava culture I define as the hundreds of millions of people around the world who honor or worship Vishnu. It's not like Christian culture. It's billions of people, but they're not all following the Bible per se. Overconsumption, I think that probably many presenters have discussed overconsumption, that overconsumption and its associated pollution are at the root. And I just wanted to mention that scientists broadly propose 3 categories of solutions, or at least this is my analysis. One is the remediation of existing problems. Many problems exist, and then there are attempts to address these problems, like, for example, global warming, and then development technology to prevent future problems or technologies for remediation, and less consumption. Less consumption is really a big problem. The first 2 are arguably stopgap solutions, and less consumption tends to be out of the scope of science and left to politicians, as we see with global warming. It's mainly a political issue, or at least they're at the fore of the issue. So, but political solutions tend to be shallow and inadequate. And shallow is a sort of a subtle reference to deep ecology. Cultural and theological solutions are really best. And this is a chart. We see that at the bottom left, you can see 1970. So since 1970, there's been more and more resource use. And you can see that in the world, the US is the most egregious, whereas India at 0.7 Earths, of course, this is a little old, it's a few years old. India is becoming less advanced in its relationship to nature. But nevertheless, I say Vaishnava culture, but we can refer often to Indian culture, targeting youth. So this talk is based on the fundamental concepts of a project that targets American, European, and Australian youth. And the goal is to recruit young activists. And the following are 4 environmentally relevant characteristics of Vaishnava culture. Now, I think it was Tushar Dash. I I'm not sure if it was you, but I thought in a previous talk you asked about spirituality. Well, I never use this word spiritual. In the West, spiritual and religion sometimes have a pejorative, much more so than in India. There's a pejorative sort of aura around these words. So this is cultural, Vaishnava culture. So one, and these are four things that I derive as the essence of Vaishnava culture that definitely impact the environment. One is seeing all beings as soul. And now seeing nature as sacred, or aspects of nature as sacred, creates a boundary between humans and nature. Now, this is not mine. I'd love for this to have been invented by me, but there are others who say this, especially some deep ecologists. And that can be observed in Indian society with rivers, mountains, monkeys, cows, rats, trees, and other aspects of nature. There is, in New Zealand, there is a river that they've given. This is just a 1 minute. Can you, oh, sorry. Can you hear that when I play it? Did you hear the music? Can somebody comment? Do you hear the music?
No, I don't hear.
You don't hear any music when the video starts.
No, I don't hear. Actually, while sharing the screen, there is an option for sharing the audio also. So maybe if you want to share the audio.
All right, we're going to skip these in the interest of time. Here's a video called Human-Centric versus Life-Centric. And I use the word life-centric. It's a 1 minute video. I was going to show it's on YouTube, but I'll just mention, it's sort of a propaganda video, you could say, that human-centric versus life-centric. And at the end, I begin to say that life or soul. So the idea is to call attention to the fact that we're focused on ourselves as humans, and that we must be focused on the concept of all life. So number 2 is joy of austerity. Excuse me. Rishabdev in the Bhagavatam, I'm quoting, explains that austerity results in Brahmasokyam. So there's this connection between joy or enjoyment and austerity. Sokyam is from the word sukha, dukkha, sukha. Vaishnavas respect yogis and sadhus for their detachment and austerity. So throughout history, there's been this respect for those who are detached from things. And this respect, it has a subtle influence in societies over exploitation of nature. In traditional culture, a brahmachari would live in Gurukul, learning to practice austerity. Number 3 is agrarian economy. Of course, you've heard many. I think it's Gauranga Prabhu, it's Eco-Village, and Radhanath Swami. Agrarian economy, Vaishnavas understand. Now, this is philosophical. This is from the Bhagavad Gita. They understand that devas provide human necessities. Agriculture is part of a natural cycle, or yajna, that reciprocates with the devas and the supreme. This is from Bhagavad Gita chapters 3 and 4. Krishna says that one who uses the resources of nature without participating in that cycle of yajna is a thief. Yo bhukte stena eva saha. So that cycle of yajna is that we get resources from nature and we offer those in yajna, and then by offering the we get, again, good results from our labor. So a lot of people, India used to, I don't know anymore, but in the 50s, 60s, 70s, at the beginning of movies, films, there used to be this word karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karam phaletur purmate sangosu karmani, that the everyone has the right to work. So I think it was government wanted to encourage everyone to work hard. But it says, no, we don't have the right to those results. So what do we do with the results? We offer them. And here, regardless, there's Gandhiji proposed a little more liberal definition of yajna. He taught that we were born with yajna just as we were born with karma. So this is consistent, but this is Vaishnava philosophy, that yajna and karma. Gandhi said that the concept of yajna implies that we are debtors for life and obliged to serve the universe. This concept is not available. I was first associated with Prabhupada in 1967, and he was talking about debts to the ancestors and to the devas. And it was something I had never heard in my life growing up in the US, debts to these entities that were beyond my vision. So that idea is common within the culture. Ishopanishad says that the Supremo owns everything and one should accept only one's quota. And these themes are embedded deeply in the Vaishnava psyche. Here's a collage of agrarian, sort of illustrating agrarian society. Now, number 4, this is, I would say, the most important practical aspect of our presentation or our teaching, is celebration of Vishnu Leela. So Vaishnavism supports at its essence a Leela-based culture. And Vaishnavas celebrate Vishnu and Krishna Leelas in art, architecture, home and temple worship, drama, festivals, holidays, and more. Leelas provide a mystical connection with the divine. Notice I don't use the word spiritual. In practice, they divert attention, resources, and money away from the exploitation of nature and toward the celebration of the Supreme and the Devas. In the current age, yajna, which is I mentioned above, is expressed through the celebration of Vishnu Leela and Nama. The Puranas and Itihasas are composed almost entirely of Leelas. Another name for Vishnu is Yajna. Krishna explains that he is the Adhyagya or Paramatma. This is at the end of chapter 5, verse 29. He says, Bhoktarang Yagitapasang. And in chapter 8, he talks about himself as Adhyagya. So he's the enjoyer of all yagyas. This is a kind of idea of celebration of Leela. Celebration of Leelas accompanied by Nama and distribution of prasad is yajna in this age. Of course, in India, you see all these people doing the Agnihotra yajna. In the ISKCON movement and in the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that concept of yajna is there, certainly, but the broader concept is endorsed throughout the Vaishnava world. These Tukaram and all these other Vaishnavas, they have this, especially within sort of popular Vaishnavism. People can do Leela celebration every day, just worshiping deity in their home. Vishnu, form of Vishnu Narayana, Baal Krishna, all these different types of worship are connected with Leela. So celebration of Leela is accompanied by Nama and distribution of Prasad. Now, this, I can't emphasize enough, the practical side of Leela celebration is that the mass of people are encouraged to find enjoyment in the Leelas and not through overconsumption. Now, the Pope discusses, in 2015, he issued something, and he said, he spoke about the overconsumption can be counteracted. The obsession with overconsumption can be counteracted by basically by contemplation and religious life. And in the previous discussion, Rasvilas Prabhu, Rameshji, said that the simple living or this contemplative living or looking inside, but I'm endorsing something else. I'm looking outside. It's a cultural focus on the Leela celebration on a massive scale. The practical aspect. Sorry, did I read that? The practical aspect. Yes, to combat overconsumption. And that's the mass of people, and society's leaders are encouraged to establish temples and sponsor grand festivals in honor of the Leelas. So that society is not overwhelmed with the obsession for consumption, which is mistakenly taken for enjoyment. Now, here's another video essay, 1 minute only, that I was going to show, but actually, if I'm going to be, oh, looks like I'm going on 20 minutes. We're finishing up here. So this was a 1 minute video showing that the two types of enjoyment, the exploitative enjoyment that causes environmental destruction, and non-exploitative cultural ecology. So I'm going to move quickly here. This concept of Vaishnava culture is within the category of cultural ecology. It's an academic discipline. Now, I want to get into philosophy. I'm really going to go through this fast because it's right at the end. But I'm a little, I guess you say, proud. Vaishnava shouldn't be proud. I'm a little proud of this aspect. The Taittiriya Aranyaka lists 4 pramanas: Aitihya, Smriti, Pratyaksha, and Anumana. So I'm focusing here on Aitihya. Aitihya comes from, we all know the word itihasa. Itihasa is also from, it means history. So Aitihya is sometimes identified with Smriti, that is the Vedas, Puranas, and Itihasas that are passed down in the form of tradition. It's sometimes defined as expert testimony, like that in a court of law, or as heritage, meaning the Vedic heritage. But Aitihya is a pramana. Now, I'm arguing that a science that relies on pratyaksha is incomplete without Aitihya, and there's little to no evidence that such a science based on pratyaksha, like these how do you say it, Lokayatas, the Charavakas from the maybe 500 BC or something around there, they were very popular in India. That such a science can foster a culture, pratyaksha, that does not overexploit and destroy nature. If science allows harm to befall humanity and earth, then it's either false or incomplete. Now, many scientists believe that an observation or analytical science is not responsible for the earth's destruction. However, my argument is that such a knowledge system is irrational and irresponsible. The means of reestablishing harmony with nature is to incorporate Aitihya within science. So those who depend on pratyaksha must accept Aitihya because culture's effect on nature is observable. So here's a little slide. This is the end, by the way. A little slide with one of our, at present, this is really more of a network We have plans for developing our strategies. I didn't present any of our strategies here for how we're going to develop, but that's another talk. This is Shri Devi leading a group of young activists in New Orleans, climate activists. So that's the end of my presentation. I think I did 15 minutes, didn't I? No, I did 20.
20 minutes.
But I lost 2 minutes to technology. So now, let's see, where am I?
So
I can't, shall I click, shall I eliminate the share? I'm still sharing, is that right?
yes.
No, I'm not.
Hare Krishna.
Now I'm back.
So now the session is open to the questions. We can take few questions.
Top, there would be stop screen.
Stop share, Prabhu. Stop share.
And in between, I will just summarize also. Sriman Dayanand has spoken about the Vaishnav culture and especially about recruiting the young people, life-centric approaches about all human beings are soul, joy of austerity, Brahma Saukhyam, agrarian economy, celebration of Vishnu Leela and its importance, types of enjoyment, cultural ecology and related philosophy. Thank you, sir, for giving an excellent talk that has increased our knowledge. Now the session is open to the question. Please type your question to the chat box. So I think everybody has understood.
Okay, I'll just mention one thing. Now, again, I just wanted to emphasize that this is these concepts are meant to be presented to convert Vaishnava activists in the United States, Europe, and Australia. So this presentation is really not so much for Indian consumption, although certainly as a part of modern global culture, it is in that sense.
So thank you, sir. So we will now.
There are a couple of questions, Prabhu. Prabhu,
Yeah, there are a couple of questions.
The chat box,
Yes,
please see.
questions I am seeing, but we can take it later on. That has been covered also earlier. There is
Somebody said, can science and philosophy go hand in hand?
Yes.
Yeah, what's the use? I'm going to speak, I'm a bit of an iconoclast. What's the use of philosophy? In the 50s, I had a favorite comedian. And the comedian said, my brother is a Harvard philosopher, and a philosopher is somebody who says, this is a glass of water, but is it a glass of water? And if it is a glass of water, why is it a glass of water? And eventually he dies of thirst. So that's sort of a part of my opinion about philosophy. So philosophy and spirituality are something that, as I said, in the West, these are, I mean, if you look at income, who makes more money in the university, a physicist or a philosopher? A professor of religion or a professor of chemistry or biology? So where does society place emphasis? So my point is that that this has to be practical. So culture is practical. What I presented to you was indeed philosophical, but we have practical strategies for how to implement this, for how to convert young people and get young people to be active and to support our vision. All right, I will say two things. Our fundamental focus, we have two. One is to conduct festivals, grand festivals. Now, if I had my way, I would take all of the money that Vaishnavas collect and put them into Rath Yatra type festivals in the West. Every month we should spend $1 million on a festival, because that's the yajna, a Leela festival. Leela, that's the philosophy. Vaishnava philosophy. That's what replaces enjoyment. So instead of $1 million spent on Jeff Bezos or Zuckerman or whoever, let's spend it on Leela festivals. On the other side, on agricultural development, getting all these city boys and girls back to the farms where their grandfathers and great-grandfathers came from. So those are the two fundamental strategies of this activist program. Yes, somebody else?
Yeah, so there is one more question on still Vaishnavas do not correlate with environmentalism, thinking it is not their responsibility. They think it's deviation from Vaishnavism. How do we reconcile? So
yes, I understand this perspective very well, because when I present Vaishnavism, the environment they have, many Vaishnavas have a misconception about how I'm just concerned about Mother Earth. And that's, as you say, a deviation. It's just a matter of pushing Vaishnavas to. Now, I've decided some years ago not to place the ordinary Vaishnava in a negative light in terms of the environment. My position is that every Vaishnava is an environmentalist, because as Ras Vilas Prabhu said in the previous talk, if one is a vegetarian, one consumes half of the water that a non-vegetarian consumes. Now that's just a vegetarian, but Vaishnavas overall, if you consider the hundreds of millions of Vaishnavas, they're living far more in harmony with nature. So simply by identifying as a Vaishnava, one is an environmentalist. As a vegetarian, as somebody who's a little bit less interested in consumption. And I think that that's better to take a positive point of view in relation to Vaishnavas instead of a negative view, and saying that, oh, you have to improve in order to set an example to the outside world. Why improve? The improvement will be there naturally if we push this agenda, in my opinion. So sorry, that's enough from me. Another point, and I'll answer with just 2-3 words if you want to ask another 1 or 2 questions.
So we can take only last question. They are asking, in your presentation, you showed India not using resources fully like America. Please throw more light on it.
Yeah, America is a primitive society. Primitive. Those societies that consume more are primitive. They're non-advanced societies, not developed. The societies who use less resources are advanced. They are the developed countries or societies. That's my iconoclastic statement. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that didn't sound very enthusiastic. Anyway, that's all right.
Okay. Thank you, Sriman Dayanand Prabhu. It was a very interesting talk, and we have got a lot of good perspectives. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So we will now move to the next session. And that is by Professor Gopal Patel, who will speak on Hindu perspective in addressing the global environmental crisis. So Mr. Gopal Patel is an environmental activist, founder and director of Bhumi Global. I will just briefly introduce about him. Gopal Patel is a faith-based environmental activist, compiler, and consultant for over 10 years, working in India, East Africa, Europe, and North America. He is co-founder and director of Bhumi Global, a non-profit organization that works to educate and mobilize Hindu communities globally for environmental action. He currently serves as co-chair of UN Multi-Faith Advisory Council and is a member of advisory board to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Born and raised in England, he currently lives in New York City area, metro city area. Thank you. Over to Professor Gopal Patel. And
thank you very much, Dr. Niyati Joshi. Thank you, Ramesh ji, and everyone for having me. I know it's very late for you in India. It's still early morning here in New York. So good morning from New York. And I know also that we're running a little bit over time. So I'll try to keep my remarks as short as possible and see if we can have some discussion as well. And it's great to go after Dayananda ji, who is a real inspiration and mentor in this space of Vaishnavism and culture and how to address the global environmental crisis. My talk is going to be a little bit more focused from a global perspective and a little bit more focused on the policy aspects of the environmental crisis and what Hinduism can bring to global policy. I'm going to share my screen, so let me see if I can get that up and running. Okay, that's that. And then, great. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. All right. So the title of my talk is Hindu Perspectives in Addressing the Global Environmental Crisis. And as was mentioned, I serve as the founder and director of Bhumi Global, a global Hindu environmental organization. And we also do a lot of work at the United Nations, advising the UN on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as Gaurangaji was talking about earlier. And we're also on the advisory board for the new UN program called the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which is being launched by the UN on World Environment Day, which is on June 5th. But obviously today we are celebrating World Biological Diversity Day. So happy Biodiversity Day to all of you. Let's get this show on the road. Okay, so in terms of the work, just to explain a little bit more about who we are and what we do, Bhumi Global has been working now for over 10 years, and we are an international network of Hindu temples and communities and leaders. And what we try to do is bring a Hindu perspective or Hindu perspectives to environmental concerns. And we do that through educating people, engaging them, and empowering them for environmental action. Our work is focused on action, but we work at a large cross section from grassroots activism all the way up to policy at the United Nations level. And I just wanted to pause a little bit because we've been talking about the environmental crisis and sustainability, and I wanted to share as a reminder, as I'm sure all of us already know, what is the environmental crisis that we are facing right now. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, they frame the environmental crisis under 3 categories: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Now, obviously, these 3 areas are distinct in their own right, but there's also significant overlap between the 3 of them as well. So if we just briefly go into what each of these are. So for climate change, we know climate change is what is more commonly known as global warming, the burning of fossil fuels, carbon dioxide being trapped in the Earth's atmosphere, and therefore the planet heating. And it's a crisis right now because the planet is heating far too quickly, and it's not cooling down quickly enough. And therefore we are significantly off track to meet the Paris climate targets, which was set in 2015. We're off base to meet those by a significant amount. And so there's a real crisis going on right now when it comes to how warm the planet is getting over such a short period of time. The next crisis is the biodiversity crisis. And as I mentioned, we were celebrating World Biodiversity Day today. And biodiversity loss is something which we do not maybe see or experience on a day-to-day basis, but it's something that's going on significantly behind the scenes. So for example, within nature, there is a natural rate of extinction amongst species and biodiversity. And at the moment, what we're seeing is like between 100 to 1,000 times more the natural rate of extinction in the natural world. A recent report that came out, I think it was earlier this year, by the World Wildlife Fund, showed that since 1970, there has been a 2/3 decline in biodiversity across the world. And if you look in various parts of the world, you'll see different things. For example, in North America, billions of birds have been killed or died over the last 50 years. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 95% of biodiversity has been lost there. And so biodiversity loss is essentially the fabric of our world and what underpins all of our societies and all of our lives. And it's literally dying. And it's a major, major issue coupled with climate change. And then pollution, as those of us who are living in India and specifically in the cities of India, we may be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Air pollution, water pollution, other kinds of pollution are very damaging for the natural world, but also for human health. And we see, according to the World Health Organization, that over 7 million people every year die of air pollution across the world. And I think India currently maybe has 7 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world. So that's definitely a crisis. And you're seeing now that the air pollution crisis is not just affecting countries like India and China, but also affecting countries like the United Kingdom. Last year, there was the first recorded case of a young girl in London dying of air pollution. That was the first ever time that has been attributed to someone's death in the UK. So air pollution is a global concern, as is water pollution as well. And these are the 3 main categories according to the UN, but we know there are other environmental crises as well. Again, talking to India, we know the water crisis is very acute in India. We know that India is going to significantly struggle to have enough water for its population by 2030. We're already seeing in India cities being stretched with their water supply, specifically Bangalore. I think last year was very water stressed. And again, that's a global issue. Cape Town had a major issue with water a couple of years ago as well. So there are a myriad number of environmental crises all coming to a head at the same point. And it is overwhelming. And it is right, and it is important that religious, spiritual, cultural institutions look at these issues and see what we can do to address them. And as we are talking about faith and spirituality, I thought it would be important to look at the history a little bit about how we got to where we are right now. We can, yes, it's a result of technology, it's a result of greed, it's a result of overconsumption, as previous speakers have been talking about. But in many ways, where did those ideas take root in the world? And specifically, where did those ideas take root in the Western world? And historians, environmentalists, in many ways point to 2 moments in history. The first is probably more commonly known, the Industrial Revolution, which started where I grew up in the United Kingdom in the late 1800s. And the Industrial Revolution was really the starting point where fossil fuels became the main source of energy. And we know that fossil fuels are the main cause of climate change. And so the Industrial Revolution, that marker from the late 1800s onwards, is the point by which climate scientists measure the increase in global temperatures. And so the Industrial Revolution, for those who are interested in the history of the environment, is a point to look at. What is a little bit less known, but is getting more awareness around, is the arrival of Christopher Columbus to the Americas, coupled with what was called the Doctrine of Discovery, or the Papal Bull of 1493. Those moments combined marked a significant shift in global history. Specifically, Columbus's arrival showed that there was a new world, so to speak, to be conquered. And that conquer of the Western world, or of the Americas, was facilitated by this understanding of the doctrine of discovery issued by the Catholic Church and the Pope at the time. And essentially what the doctrine of discovery said was that Christians are allowed to colonize and take over any part of the world that a previous Christian has not laid claim to. So what that resulted in was a significant number of Christian missionaries coming to the Americas to literally take over North America, Central and South America. And in doing so, as we've been talking about earlier today, really destroy indigenous wisdom, indigenous culture, traditional understandings of land management, of forestry, of agriculture, of animal husbandry. All of those things were wiped out to a significant level and replaced by, in many ways, a technological, like a framework which really separated humans with the land. And so these two moments are important. And I want to raise those up because I think we just focus on the technology and the policies and so on like that. But I think it's important to understand where the roots of the crisis actually come from. So what are the global religious organizations and traditions doing right now, and what is happening on a global level to address the crisis? Again, many of you will be familiar with some of these efforts that are listed on the screen, but you see specifically where I do a lot of my work at the United Nations level, you see a major move in the UN and associated institutions to engage very strongly with religious organizations. And so you have within the UN Environment Program, you have a religion program called Faith for Earth, which is a major initiative. You have also the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative at UNEP, which is working with indigenous leaders and religious leaders in different countries to address tropical rainforest deforestation. You also see faith-based engagement around the different UN processes and the UN negotiations when it comes to climate change, biodiversity, and other environmental issues as well. And the United Nations itself, I think it was in 2009, said that when the religions come together and work on environmental issues, it's the largest civil society movement in history. And so there's a great upswell going on right now of people of all religious traditions stepping up to address the environmental crisis. And obviously we're here to talk about what Hinduism can offer to that. So I want to focus on two things. The first is that in order to engage with the issues, what our organization really focuses on and what we really try to encourage other Hindu organizations to do is to understand and develop a Hindu framework of engagement, because every religious tradition has an understanding of not just what it means to be a person in the world and what is my relationship with the earth, what is my relationship with my community, what is my relationship with God. Every religious tradition has that. But what also every religious tradition has is that's the more on the theology, it's more on the social teaching in terms of how should I act? How should I be a good person? How should I take care of myself? How should I take care of others? And also, how do we change things in the world so they are better, right? And I think that's the crux of what we're talking about today is we're in a crisis. How do we make things better? And I want to offer what we often in our organization do with the Hindu groups we work with is offer a framework for how to engage Hindus. And one of the key things we do, and we take this from, we see a lack of this in the mainstream environmental movement, is that we offer various on-ramps. We see oftentimes in the modern world that we think there's only one solution to a very complex problem. And we know that a complex problem requires a complex solution. We can't, to simplify it means we miss out the nuance and we don't bring everyone on the journey with us. And so we take inspiration from the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 12, where Krishna gives Arjun various options. He says, if you can't do this, do this. If you can't worship me like this, worship me like that. If you can't worship me like that, then do it like that. If you can't do it like that, do it like this. And he offers Arjun different on-ramps so that Arjun feels like at least he can do something. And I think that's so important in the environmental context that we're talking about, that everybody feels like they have a contribution to make. And the Bhagavad Gita talks about that specifically. It doesn't give, ultimately it gives one teaching, but it gives Arjun different options. Krishna gives Arjun options. And those options are very, very important when we're talking about social change and addressing the environmental crisis. The second thing, again, taking from the Bhagavad Gita, is that Krishna teaches Arjun according to Arjun's capacity to understand and his ability to digest what Krishna is talking about. And most importantly, as you progress through the Bhagavad Gita, you see Krishna imparts knowledge onto Arjun because Arjun is willing to learn. And I think this is also so important in the environmental movement, because we will find people who do not want to learn, or we'll find people who are unable to understand or do not want to understand, or for various reasons. Everybody is at a different part in their life journey. And we need to develop the messaging and the outreach according to where people are and where people can understand. And again, that's a beautiful lesson from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna educates Arjun based on where Arjun is in terms of his consciousness and his understanding about what he should be doing in the world. And then another part of the framing, which I think is really important, that comes out of the Bhagavad Gita, is the concept of personal responsibility. And this is in many ways the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita, which can be applied to all spheres of life, not just the environmental crisis, which is that Krishna teaches Arjun and gives Arjun options and teaches him throughout the whole text. And then right at the end, in this very famous verse, 1863, Krishna says to Arjun, essentially, I have told you everything you need to know, but you need to make the decision about what is right for you. And what that does, it puts the responsibility onto Arjun. And we all know that in our lives, when we take personal responsibility for something, we are much more invested in that activity. You know, oftentimes, if we are told to do something from someone and we don't have the personal conviction, it can be very hard to live out that teaching. But if we have internalized and made that decision for ourselves to change or do something in a different way, we are going to be much more invested to make sure we're a success in doing that. And so the Bhagavad Gita places significant emphasis on that personal responsibility, that Krishna is a friend. He is offering all the advice, education, and resources that Arjun could need. But ultimately, Arjun needs to make the decision for himself what he needs to do. And I think for all of us who are, whether we're religious leaders or activists or educators or homemakers, we all have to find out what is our personal responsibility to the environment and what can we do to make the world more environmentally friendly. And broadly speaking, this is what it's called in activism and in the social change. It's called a theory of change, which is essentially, and you know, in your own time, you can look into theories of change, but look into how do we move a group of people or an individual from one point in their life to another? How do we get someone who's not an environmental activist to start caring about the environment? How do we take a business that doesn't think it needs to be sustainable to becoming more sustainable? What does that journey look like? What are the levers? What are the pressure points in order to get someone from A to B? And that's called a theory of change. And I want to suggest that the Bhagavad Gita offers a significant framework for a Hindu theory of change or a Vaishnav theory of change. And I really suggest that we try to, in our work, try to really understand what that is so we can bring more people onto this journey. I want to talk a little bit now about Hindu opportunities to engage, because today we've heard about culture, which is very important. We've heard about theology and philosophy, which is very important as well. As I said, a lot of the work I do with Hindu groups is around policy. And what we see in many ways, as I said earlier, is that the environmental crisis is a complex issue. It's not straightforward. There are no easy solutions. And I compare it oftentimes to in the history of the world, issues around slavery or colonialism, for example, the British rule of India, there wasn't, in many ways, there was a simple solution to getting rid of the British, but at the same time, it was complex. It was difficult. It took many, many, many years, hundreds, generations of people to eventually get to the point where India became an independent state, an independent country. And so the environmental crisis, we really believe, although at its heart, the solution is simple. The solution is a spiritual solution. The solution is a values-based solution. But because of the complexity and the interconnected nature of the world, we need to be able to apply our simple solutions to the complex issues. And so here I've just listed a few things which in the realm of environmental policy and negotiations, governments and bureaucrats and business leaders and other kinds of organizations are looking at. And I list these because if we want to really meaningfully engage and address the environmental crisis, we have to look at how it's impacting so many spheres of our lives. And so, for example, if we look at the first two issues here of economics, finance, and business, most of our businesses right now are not sustainable, are not environmentally friendly, right? So how do we reform the business sector? How do we reform capitalism? How do we reform the understanding, as Day-1 was saying, that success at advanced countries means more money, when actually the most advanced countries are the ones that get by with minimum harm to the natural world. So we need to look at issues like GDP, of growth-based capitalism and all these things, and see, what does Hinduism have to say around business? What does Hinduism have to say around the current economic models that the world currently operates on? Another issue is human rights and dignity, and I'm going to couple that with human migration and refugees. We know that because of climate change and the biodiversity crisis, that human civilization is going to go under rapid transformation in a very short period of time. And you're going to see mass migration of people because they're going to be moving from countries where they can no longer live. And I'll just use the example of Bangladesh very briefly. In Bangladesh, by 2050, there'll be 18 million people who will be displaced or internally moving in Bangladesh because they will no longer be able to live there, right? So Bangladesh obviously is on the border of India. So what is going to happen to those 18 million refugees from Bangladesh? Where are they going to go, right? Because they will no longer be able to live in Bangladesh. They're going to have to move somewhere. And that's just one country. And you look at the Middle East, even here in the United States, you see people in the United States having to move from certain parts of the country because they can no longer live where they are because of climate change. What does Hinduism have to say about that? What from our Hindu Vaishnava theology and philosophy do we have to say about the rights of an individual, the dignity of an individual, the fact that people are going to be on the move in mass over the next 50 to 80 years? It's a huge issue. Loss and damage, divest, invest. These are very technical things in the environmental movement. You can go out and do your own research into that. But my point here is that for us as Hindu communities and Hindu leaders to make an impact, it's important to look at the theology, philosophy for sure. It's important to look at the culture. It's also important to look at the activities and how we're living. But it's also important to look at the policies as well that underpin the current global order and underpin the environmental crisis, and see how we can reform those policies from a Hindu lens, from a Hindu perspective. I think that's one of the key things the Hindu community really needs to lean into in the coming years. I'm just going to finish with a final example. The UN are having the Food Systems Summit in September. And this is to give you an example of what I mean to lean into the complexities, is that when we talk about food, we think food is very simple. But actually, if you break down our global food systems, they are very, very complex. And so the Food Systems Summit that the UN are organizing in September are looking at food through 5 different lenses or action tracks. And you'll see them on the screen here. So it's not just about getting good food, but it's about making sure the food is safe and nutritious, making sure the food is used using sustainability or sustainable consumption patterns, making sure it's nature positive, making sure that those who produce the food have equitable livelihoods, making sure that our food systems are vulnerable, are resilient to vulnerability, shocks, and stress. So it's not just about, let's just make sure everybody eats well, but actually in order for everybody to eat well, there's a complex system globally behind the scenes that needs to be reformed so that we get good, nutritious, healthy, environmentally friendly food on our table. So this is just one example of food. If we look at any other environmental issue, behind the scenes, there are immense complexities there. And Hinduism has the depth, has the wisdom, has the history to speak to these complexities. And I think that's the opportunity and the challenge for Hinduism, not just in India, but in the world as well, to speak and engage with the complexities of the world. So I'll stop there and I'll hopefully have some time for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the floor is open for the questions. Many people do not see spirituality being connected environmental concerns. But do you face any public resistance in your work as you combine religion, spirituality, and environmentalism?
Very good question. Thank you. Is it Vanshika? Do we face any resistance? Actually, no. On the outset, there's no resistance to the idea. The resistance oftentimes, though, is when non-religious people, policymakers, governments, and businesses, when they think that the solutions that the religions are offering are too simplistic, when they see that we're not engaging, as I was talking about, with the actual issues and the complexities on the ground. So let me give you an example. We may, and in the realm of policy, we may say everyone should go vegetarian, right? And that's an admirable aim. And if everyone in the world did go vegetarian, we would significantly address the environmental crisis. But we know that for everyone to go vegetarian is not an easy thing to do. There are social, cultural, economic factors for people to go vegetarian. And so for us to be taken credible, we have to go beyond the talking points of saying everyone should do this or everyone should believe that, but actually go into the details, be like, okay, well, why are people not being vegetarian? Why are people not having access to good fruits and vegetables? And I think that's where the pushback comes from governments and businesses, is when the religious, spiritual talking points are too simplistic and not engaging with the ground reality.
Now we have another very interesting question. Sir, is not finding business in Hinduism culture a morally incorrect step?
I would say, my understanding that in Hinduism, you have dharma, artha, karma, moksha. You have various pursuits that one has to go through. And artha is the pursuit of business, is the pursuit of money. We need money to survive in the world. That's just the reality. And money is made through business. And so therefore, we need to think about, in the traditional times, we had an understanding of what artha meant. We had an understanding of what a moral framework was for generating income. But unfortunately, we are not, in most parts of the world, we are not using a moral framework for our business. We are using just economic factors, right? And so I don't think it's, as was suggested here, a morally incorrect step. It's just that we have to find out ways to build our businesses to generate income. And just for example, any Hindu organization is generating income. ISKCON generates income. you can't dress the murtis, you can't, feed people prasadam unless you're generating some income, So like, what's the framework for that income generation? And also, who is giving that money? Are we taking money from people who are engaged in fossil fuel industries? Are we taking money from people who are engaged in the plastics industries, which is very damaging, and so on like that? And so we really need to think through the moral framework about how we generate and receive money to do our work, either as a religious organization or as a private individual.
Yes. We have one more question we can take.
Sure.
Though we have no many research paper and programs that are going on, the situation is still the same and going worse. So how can we make research work into proper?
The question is like so let me read this question. So we had so many research programs are going on, and the situation is still the same. I think part of the challenge is that, the opportunity is that you're right, the research is there. And so the question is now, how do we implement that research into our daily lives? And how do we make the research relevant? I think in the past, the research has been irrelevant, or the research hasn't reached the people. And so we need to look at the research, make it relevant and to the current contemporary concerns that we have, and apply it. I don't think it's a question of the lack of research. I think the question is like, it goes back to my earlier question, how much do we actually want to change? And unfortunately for most of us, the primary motivator is economic development, right? I mean, that's why we go to school. That's why we go to college. It's why we get a job, and the spiritual pursuit is important to us. And it may guide us in so many ways, but at the end of the day, we need to put food on our table. And because the economic model is so environmentally destructive, it's very hard to swim against that grain of a system which is opposed to living in balance and harmony with the world. And so it requires like a personal desire to shift things in a very significant ways. It's like Gandhi said, I know someone's mentioning here about Gandhi's International Day of Nonviolence. I actually think October 2nd is some kind of International Day for Nonviolence. You can look into that. But as Gandhi once said, he said, my friends joke that it's very expensive for them to keep me poor. It's expensive for his friends to keep Gandhi poor. And what he meant by that is that it's difficult to live against the grain of mainstream society. It's very difficult. If we want to be a poor person, it's actually not very easy. It's actually quite expensive to do. So I think the research is there. We have to make that personal conviction to actually implement it in our own lives.
So would you like to take one more question, sir?
I'm here as long as you need me.
Okay. So thank you for your kindness. It was daunting fact revealed about arrival of Columbus and doctrine of discovery as other historical event identified as root of crisis. On RAM is such a revealing perspective as solution to complex problems. So I think it is not a question, it's a praise for the presentation.
Yeah.
But
thank you, Aditi, for that. And I think, again, the reason I shared it is because it's important to know the cultural context for why we have these systems in place. This understanding that man and nature are separate, which underpins modern society, not just in the West, but also in India, in Indian government and business and finance, is not arbitrary. It came from a very specific theological understanding out of Christianity. And I'm not criticizing Christianity here, but I'm just saying there was a certain moment in time where Christianity separated people and nature. And because of that separation, that led to people then being able to exploit the natural world, right? And so if we can understand the cultural theological roots of our so-called secular society, then we can understand how we can actually start reforming them. And even the idea of a secular society, there's a book by a British historian called Tom Holland. He wrote a book called Dominion a couple of years ago. And he's a Christian and he's a historian. And he says, even the idea of a secular country is a Christian idea. Just process that. The idea of a secular country is a Christian idea. Okay. And so we really need to examine these things in a very thoughtful, mature way. Like, what underpins what we consider to be a norm? We consider a secular country to be a norm, but actually that's a secular country is a very Christian idea, right? So these are the things we really need to like think about and kind of engage with from a Hindu Vaishnav perspective.
So one more suggestion is coming repeatedly. Can we do something to UN with UN to declare one day as a meat-free day, like they are suggesting October 2? So can it be done some way or the other? I mean, since you are also engaged with many UN consulting bodies.
Yeah, I mean, the way, I mean, I love that idea. The way these things work within the UN is that a country needs to propose an idea like that. So for example, we have International Day of Yoga, I think in June or July. Obviously that was proposed by India, and then the other countries supported the proposal. So if we want an International Day of Vegetarianism or International Day of Plant-based diets, then I would suggest you lobby the Indian government to make that proposal to the United Nations. And then the Indian government can get other countries to support the proposal, and then that's how it will happen.
Thank you, sir. So I think we don't have questions now, and I thank you for all kindness for giving time to extended time up to 1 hour. So because of the scheduled time. So thank you so much. And we have actually presented in this session roots of environmental crisis, global faith efforts, Hindu framework and opportunities of engagements, responsibilities that can be taken to improve upon that perspectives from Bhagavad Gita, and theories of change. You have also suggested that Vaishnav theories of change. So thank you so much. These are the takeaway from this presentation. And I thank all the participants and just request to wait 2 minutes and request Dr. Jyotishwar Prabhu to show the slide for tomorrow's presentation. So today we are finishing the first day. Tomorrow would be the day 2. We will be starting at 9 a.m. sharp with the presentation, which will be more focusing on empowering maybe villages or children, or maybe environmental habits that is going to be covered tomorrow. So important presentations are empowering villages with sustainable and simple technologies, sustainability through simple life practices based on cow culture, impact of integrating values in children for climate change, integrating the sublime in the colonial era, the simple jackpot model for ideal schools, exploring Vedic approach to life and alternative lifestyles for sustainable environment, limiting it is not showing limiting climate change through spirituality. Historical analysis of environmental ethics and the relevance of eco-spirituality in India's future. So tomorrow the sessions are also great in this consequent upon these sessions of today. So I request you all to join tomorrow and enrich yourself, and also we will be extremely thankful to you for joining. Yes, Prabhuji, PPT you please share with us. We will share with everybody. Meeting link will remain the same. So Dr. Jyotishwar, can we close now?
Yeah, I think we can call it off day. Yeah.
Mr. Praveen,
So
anything
the
to
feedback
say?
form has been, I think feedback form is there or
Circulated,
not?
yeah, it was circulated by Sushen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would request the audience participants to please fill the feedback form for session 2. Is it there? I'm not seeing. Can somebody again share the, okay, people are saying filled. That's good. Okay, so Jyotishwar Prabhu, would you like to share the forthcoming sessions apart from the conference?
Just few seconds, please.
Yeah. So a couple of wonderful seminars are coming in the next few weeks. So this is one Bhagavad Gita seminar, which is starting from it's a course, not seminar. It's a certificate course starting from 5th of June. Basically 18 chapters in 18 sessions every Saturday from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. So you can whoever is interested can register by visiting the ISS website. And also, yeah, please next one. And Professor Gopal Gupta would next Sunday 5:30 p.m. 30th of May will be talking on taking guidance from Bhagavad Gita in the battle against COVID pandemic. So please do join. This will be a wonderful session by Professor Gopal Gupta next Sunday. And after Professor Gopal Gupta, there is a 3-session series starting from 6th of June, appreciating and advancing towards Vedic science. 6th June, everything is soul, means consciousness. 13th of June, 3 aspects of soul, and 20th of June, 3 modes of material nature. So this will be taken by Mr. Ashish Dalela. He's a wonderful acclaimed author of 17 books on Vedic science. So these are the next 4 sessions, basically 1 month advanced schedule, and many more will be coming after that. And in December also, we are going to have a wonderful conference that will be Jigyasa 2, basically, the international virtual conference on Vedantic and scientific perspective on the mysteries of life and cosmos, investigating the role of randomness and chance. So this will be on 18th and 19th of December this year. So further details will be available on the website of Institute for Science and Spirituality. So you are requested to visit the site and get more details about this forthcoming conference, and you can also participate. So this is the social media presence of Institute for Science and Spirituality, and it's available on YouTube. You can go visit the YouTube channel and see the other videos around. It's a repository of 74 videos and on various topics of science and spirituality and religion. We are also available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and this and other channels. I think, and I request participants to please fill the feedback form for session 2. Okay, Jyotisha Prabhu, I think that's done. And Professor Ramesh Goel, would you like to say anything if you are there?
Professor Ramesh Goel, I think he's busy somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay, so we can wait for 5 minutes.